Chapter 1445. Ling Han waved his hand and said, "I still have a few people here. I want 8 seats." Stone Emperor could not help his surprise. They couldn't just make up the numbers. No matter what, they had to be tier 2nd kings. Ling Han nodded and said, 8. Brother Ling, I'll say the ugly words first. Are you sure that aside from you and the Rain Emperor, no one else will hold us back? The North Emperor asked seriously. I'm sure, Ling Han replied with a nod. Regardless of whether it was his 2 disciples or Su Ran, which one of them wasn't a rank 2 king tier. Empress Luanxing was even a rank 3 king tier. As for the notionless saint, wasn't he a saint? At that time, the moment he released his aura, it would be enough to frighten a large group of people. Then he could seize the opportunity to attack again, and it would definitely have a miraculous effect. Only the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was slightly weaker, but even a rank 1 king tier wouldn't be too much of a burden. All right. The Stone Emperor nodded and said, then let's go find 2 more teammates. Sure. Ling Han nodded. Actually, he could also look for 2 more people, such as Long Light Star Region's Yu Ying, Yang Lin, and the others, whom he had befriended back then. However, this was the suggestion of the Stone Emperor and the North Emperor, after all, so he couldn't turn the tables on them. How much longer until the Sunken Abyss Valley opens? The Rain Emperor asked. It won't be long. I've heard that the walls of the Sunken Abyss Valley are already beginning to glow. When the walls become as bright as the sun, the Sunken Abyss Valley will open, the North Emperor replied. Then I'll be waiting for the 2 of you. Ling Han smiled. The Stone Emperor and the North Emperor left. They wanted to confirm the remaining 2 teammates as soon as possible. After the 2 of them left, Ling Han made a trip to the Sunken Abyss Valley. Sure enough, just as the Stone Emperor and the others had said, this valley was nothing special at all. There were rocks everywhere, and there were no plants, beasts, or insects. It was a valley of death through and through. But now, this ordinary valley was glowing, but the light was not strong. It was almost impossible to see during the day, and only at night. However, the changes were very fast. After only 7 days, the light could already be seen during the day. If it continued to develop at this speed, it would probably be as bright as the sun in another 10 days. Ling Han returned to his residence, and a few days later he saw the Rain Emperor and the North Emperor arrive together. There were also 2 other men with extraordinary appearances. Just by standing there casually, it was as if they were the center of the universe, causing others to unconsciously cast their gazes over. However, these 2 people were really very arrogant. It was not shown on their faces, but from their bones. Come, let me introduce you. The North Emperor smiled and said, this is Nye Tiancheng, Brother Nye. Brother Nye is the youngest of the Flying Rain Saint's 18 disciples, but he is also the most talented. Nye Tiancheng smiled. Although he appeared amiable, the arrogance in his bones could be smelled from 5 kilometers away. This is Shan Jingyi, Brother Shan. The North Emperor pointed at another person. Brother Shan is the disciple of the 6 Mountain Sage. Shan Jingyi also nodded at Ling Han with a proud expression on his face. These 2 people are really arrogant. Where are the others? Didn't you say that there are already 12 people? Shan Jingyi asked, a hint of impatience on his face. Of course he was displeased. Shouldn't these people be ready? Once they arrived, they could immediately set off. Why was there only Ling Han? Where were the others? They actually had to wait for him? How arrogant! Brother Ling, the 12 people are already here, and the Sunken Abyss Valley is about to open. Gather everyone and set off immediately, the North Emperor said with a smile. All right. Ling Han nodded. He glanced at Nye Tiancheng and Shan Jingyi, and he had a feeling that these 2 were too arrogant. They would become a cancer to the team sooner or later. In fact, the Rain Emperor and the others hadn't gone out to challenge anyone after learning about the Sunken Abyss Valley. Thus, the 7 of them quickly arrived at the main hall after receiving the news. Huh! Nye Tiancheng and Shan Jingyi both exclaimed in surprise when they saw Empress Luanxing. Although this woman didn't have a beautiful appearance, just her figure and temperament were enough to make their hearts waver, and they couldn't control themselves. She was definitely a peerless beauty. The arrogance on their faces disappeared, and they all took the initiative to introduce themselves. I am Shanjingyi. I am Ye Tiansheng. To say nothing of them, even the Stone Emperor and North Emperor were no exception. However, they viewed Ling Han as a good friend, so they naturally wouldn't be so rude. Who was Empress Luanxing? In terms of pride, who could compare to her? She pretended not to hear them, and the only person in her eyes was Ling Han. This caused Nye Tiansheng and Shan Jingyi to feel even more displeased with Ling Han. A strange light flickered in their eyes, and it was unknown what they were thinking. Let's set off. The 12 people set off, and they set off toward the Sunken Abyss Valley. This place wasn't close to the Sunken Abyss Valley. If they didn't travel at full speed, even heavenly body tier king tiers like them would need to travel for more than 2 days. However, they indeed weren't in a hurry, and they had plenty of time. Thus, they only arrived after 2 days. At this moment, the Sunken Abyss Valley was already packed with people. This kind of fateful opportunity only appeared once in a few million years. Moreover, this place restricted one's cultivation level, and they could even form teams. Even rank 3 king tiers wouldn't have an overwhelming advantage. Who wouldn't want to come and try their luck? If they obtained a great opportunity here, they might be able to completely change their fate. Prodigies would become king tiers, and king tiers would become kings among kings. As far as the eye could see, there was a dense mass of people all around the valley. At this moment, the entire valley was radiating with a gentle light. It was extremely bright, yet it didn't seem dazzling in the slightest. This is going to be a fierce battle, everyone sighed with emotion. This could be seen as a rehearsal for the competition to enter the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. In fact, the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy would also send people to stand guard and observe. Firstly, this was to prevent any accidents, and secondly, it was to select some good seedlings. After all, no matter how talented one was, it was only true battle prowess that made one a true king tier. Although not all king tiers would come, at least 90% of them would definitely come. If they couldn't reach or surpass the heavenly body tier, there was nothing they could do. Thus, they could only sit by the side. The valley only restricted one's cultivation level and wouldn't raise their cultivation level. Sun-Moon tiers would still be Sun-Moon tiers if they entered, and they would only be cannon fodder. Ling Han surveyed his surroundings. After searching for a long time, he finally discovered that the few king tiers of the Long Light Galaxy were all standing together at this moment. As mentioned before, people from the same star field would naturally feel a sense of closeness, especially since the Long Light star field wasn't strong. There were only 3 monarchs in the Long Light star field. Ling Han saw Faceless again, but he was too far away, so he didn't go over to greet him. And Gu Daoyi as well. Ling Han should be the first person in the entire immortal realm to know of Gu Daoyi's existence. However, previously he had only heard of Gu Daoyi's voice, but had never seen him. Now, he had finally seen him in person. There was no need to search for him. He was too conspicuous, like a crane among chickens. There was an empty space of at least 10 zhang around him. A circle of people surrounded him, their eyes revealing fanatical expressions. This person didn't look very handsome, but his skin was like jade, and his hair was like ink, revealing an indescribable elegance. This is the immortal fetus. Chapter 1446. It's really a divine fetus nurtured by the 9 deaths heaven art, Empress Luanxing whispered in Ling Han's ear. Moreover, she used her divine sense to transmit this message. Unless there was a saint nearby, it was impossible to intercept it. She grabbed Ling Han's wrist, and even with Ling Han's physique, he felt a sharp pain. It was clear how agitated the Empress was now. As if sensing it, Gu Daoyi also looked over, but did not stop on Ling Han. In his eyes, Ling Han was naturally not worthy of his attention. He was referring to Empress Luanxing. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a meaningful smile appeared on his lips. Obviously, he had also discovered the secret that Empress Luanxing cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art. Perhaps, to him, Empress Luanxing was also a delicious feast that could make his divine fetus even more extraordinary. Quick, stop that dog. This damn dog is too inconsiderate, biting people everywhere. The crowd was in an uproar. They saw a large black dog running over from afar, and a large group of people followed behind him. All of them were incredibly furious and seething with anger. Ling Han couldn't help but grimace. This was the large black dog from the Medicine King's cave. Right now, he was no longer as large as a mountain, but rather about the size of a normal dog. His fur was as black as ink and glossy. However, this person was really a troublemaker. He had just arrived and was pursued by tens of thousands of people. His halo of hatred was even stronger than Ling Han's. The large black dog was extremely flashy. As he ran, he turned around and taunted, "Bastards, why are you running so slowly? Grandpa Dog will give you a handicap." As he said this, he indeed stood on his hind legs and ran on his hind legs. Pooh, many people instantly spluttered with laughter, but the people chasing him exploded in anger. This was too despicable. "Bastards, you still haven't caught up. Forget it, Grandpa Dog will walk backwards, okay?" The large black dog crawled on his two front paws, and his whole body was upside down, but he was still extremely fast. The effect of this taunt was definitely great. A large black dog crawling backwards, and was actually still faster than everyone else. Pa 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 pa, they were all slapped in the face. "Damn lowly dog. We have to catch him and tear him into pieces. I've never seen such a shameless demonic dog before. Kill, kill, kill." This made the people chasing after them even angrier. Each and every one of them was fuming. The large black dog's speed was extremely fast, and his figure was extremely nimble. He was like a fish in water in the crowd. On the other hand, the others were met with many obstacles, and the distance between them and the large black dog grew larger and larger. "Isn't this little Han? Come, call me uncle." When the large black dog saw Ling Han, he couldn't help but pause for a moment before waving his paw at him. It was just that it was standing upside down, so this greeting made people want to vomit blood. Ling Han was rendered speechless. The large black dog's character was still the same, and he would always try to take advantage of others. "This young sister isn't bad. She's so beautiful. Why don't you become my maidservant?" The large black dog had his eyes on Empress Luanxing. Even though he was a dog, he was still moved by the Empress Luanxing's charm. His mouth was full of saliva. "How dare you?" Nie Tiancheng immediately rebuked. He wanted to flatter Empress Luanxing, so he immediately swatted his paw over. Instantly, numerous heavenly bodies appeared. These weren't the heavenly bodies that he had formed in his dantian. Instead, they were the result of his cultivation technique. "What are you shouting for, ugly thing? How is Grandpa Dog going to deal with you?" The large black dog's figure dashed forward, and he actually broke through Nie Tiancheng's blockade. He then viciously bit down on Nie Tiancheng's wrist. "Ah!" Nie Tiancheng instantly screamed in pain. The large black dog's teeth had bitten down so hard that even Ling Han had felt a faint pain. How could Nie Tiancheng compare to Ling Han's physique? This bite instantly caused blood to flow. Moreover, he was unable to shake off the large black dog no matter how hard he tried. "Let go! Let go!" Nie Tiancheng was on the verge of tears. This large black dog was far too rude. He was actually biting someone. Which elite in the world fought like this? With a crack, the bone in Nie Tiancheng's arm was snapped. The large black dog landed on the ground with his severed arm in his mouth. He then continued to flee, as his pursuers had already caught up to him. "Damn dog, give me back my arm." Nie Tiancheng also started to chase after the large black dog. Although he could still regrow his arm, doing so would consume a certain amount of his life force. Thus, he naturally wanted to snatch his severed arm back. After all, regrowing it would consume much less of his life force. "Come and chase after Grandpa Dog." The large black dog once again stood on his hind legs. He then began to flee on his hind legs and said, "It's not that Grandpa Dog is insulting you, but you're just a bunch of trash. Damn dog. Despicable dog." Everyone was infuriated, and they chased after the large black dog relentlessly. Shan Jingyi couldn't help but rejoice in his heart. Fortunately, he had reacted a moment too late. Otherwise, he would have been the one to lose his arm. Although he was conceited, he didn't think that he was more powerful than Nie Tianqing. Thus, he naturally felt a lingering fear in his heart. This large black dog wasn't necessarily very powerful. However, there was indeed something miraculous about him. It was as if origin power couldn't stop him, and coupled with his terrifying teeth, anyone would be at a disadvantage if they fought against him. Moreover, this dog was extremely fast, and it would immediately flee after gaining an advantage. It wouldn't give anyone a chance to retaliate at all. Nie Tianqing was truly unlucky this time. With the large black dog's interference, the solemn atmosphere instantly became a farce. Everyone watched as the large black dog dashed around, drawing hatred everywhere he went. They were all laughing uproariously, but they were the ones who had been provoked, and they were so angry that they could start smoking. Grandpa Dog is destined to ascend to the pinnacle of this world, and I'm going to start accepting servants now. This is a rare opportunity, and if you miss it, there won't be a next time. The large black dog shouted as he ran. It was unknown where he had tossed his severed arm. You, Grandpa Dog will give you a chance, he said as he pointed at the people around him. Those who had been pointed at were naturally enraged. Most of the people here were king tiers, yet they were now being singled out by a dog to become his servants. How could they accept this? They naturally couldn't offend the dignity of king tiers. Some people were fine, and they simply laughed it off. However, more and more people joined in on the chase. This large black dog was a natural-born troublemaker. If one had to ask who was the most famous, it would definitely be this despicable dog. He had instantly surpassed Gu Daoyi and Empress Luanxing. However, his despicable reputation had spread far and wide, and he was like a street rat that everyone wanted to beat up. Sigh, Grandpa Dog is truly too outstanding. I'm the target of jealousy, the large black dog said with a narcissistic expression. Damn dog, come and fight me if you can. Everyone was going crazy with rage. The large black dog waved his paw and said, Grandpa Dog doesn't want to bully you. He continued to run, and he didn't even stop. After chasing for half a day, no one was able to catch up to him. The large black dog's speed was far too fast. Moreover, the route he ran was also extremely strange. It was no wonder that he dared to provoke the anger of so many people. If one wanted to defeat 10,000 people, they would first have to train their legs well. 3 days later, the large black dog was still running around in an extremely arrogant manner. Meanwhile, he had provoked almost 10% of the people in the valley. They had formed a huge group that was chasing after him. Right at this moment, a pillar of light suddenly rose from within the valley. A gigantic golden rock soared into the sky, instantly reaching an altitude of 300 meters above the valley. It then hovered in the air, exuding a boundless divine light. The sunken abyss valley has opened. Chapter 1448. In truth, even sage artifacts would be suppressed here, unable to unleash their full power. Naturally, quasi-sage artifacts would be even more restricted. However, saintly material was still saintly material. It was just like how a Tier 3 king would still be slightly stronger than a Tier 2 king despite having their cultivation suppressed. Meanwhile, the 3 people he was facing were only Tier 1 kings. How could they possibly contend against Nie Tianqing, a Tier 2 king equipped with a pseudo-sacred weapon? It was not unusual to lose, but to lose so quickly still surprised Ling Han. He took another look at the peach branch. When are you going to dig up the seed tree and plant it in the Black Tower? He wanted to eat the immortal peach. Even though the immortal peach was no longer living up to its name and could only be called a godly peach, he didn't mind at all. If the Flying Rain Saint knew about this, he would definitely roar in anger, "You don't care, but I care." After absorbing the 3 floating rocks, Ling Han and the others could now fly up to a height of 3 zhang. Because the floating rocks had been absorbed by them evenly, it was naturally impossible for them to soar into the sky in one go. They didn't take it to heart and continued to plunder. Failure here would not disqualify them from the competition, but they would have to start all over again. As such, the 3 people who landed on the ground immediately found 3 more rocks and levitated into the air. After all, they had just started, so they did not suffer any losses. It wasn't long before Ling Han and the others encountered a group of 7 people. They were charging toward them aggressively, yet their expressions changed drastically the instant they saw Empress Luanxing. They hurriedly turned around and fled. They actually didn't dare to fight. This caused Nie Tianqing, the North Emperor, and the others to feel extremely puzzled. What was going on? Could it be that they were so powerful that others would flee upon hearing of them? Meanwhile, Ling Han and the others smiled knowingly. Empress Luanxing was known as the King Tier Killer. Many people had only heard of her name, but did not know who she was. However, it was clear that the 7 people in front of them knew of her. Moreover, it was very likely that they had suffered at her hands before. Thus, the moment they saw Empress Luanxing, they felt a chill run down their spines. They did not even dare to fight her. Rank 3rd kings. Even if their cultivation had been weakened, they still had a huge advantage. Moreover, Ling Han's group had a full quota of 12 people. As they crushed their opponents, Nie Tianqing and Shan Jingyi were basically the only ones who fought and performed well. Shan Jingyi was also extraordinary. He had a divine item that was formed from several types of divine stones. It was only the size of a palm, but it was incomparably heavy. Once it was smashed out, no matter how powerful one's defenses were, it would be useless. This was not saintly material, but rather level 16 divine soil. However, after being tempered by a saint, it could be considered a top-notch god tool in the Eternal River tier. This divine artifact was called Mount 6 Prime, which was similar to the 6 Mountain Saints title. In fact, it was even a replica of the 6 Mountain Saints divine artifact. Not only could it smash people, but it could also expand to the size of a mountain. Once it fell, it could directly flatten everything. After joining hands, Shan Jingyi and Nie Tianqing unleashed their might with the help of their 2 precious tools, and they were actually invincible. Half a day later, they had already reached a height of 1,000 feet. However, this was only a tenth of the height of the Sunken Abyss Valley, and there was still a long way to go before they reached the boulder at the top of the valley. Although there would always be a victor in the Sunken Abyss Valley, no one had ever reached the height of that boulder. This was related to the quality and quantity of the competitors. Even if there was a person who could sweep through the ages, he would still be invincible. Thus, he wouldn't be able to reach too high of a height. Only when there were hundreds of clans and thousands of trees competing in spring could a king among kings appear. This king would trample over the heads of countless king tiers and ascend to the pinnacle. Gu Daoyi gazed at the floating boulder in the sky, and images of the universe and stars flashed in his eyes. Numerous great stars were being born and being destroyed. If Ling Han could see this, he would definitely be able to guess that this was the power of creation and destruction. If one possessed these 2 powers at the same time, they would be able to break through the shackles of space and open a path into the celestial realm. This wasn't strange. Gu Daoyi was a prodigy of the celestial realm, and he had long since surpassed the peak stage of the immortal realm. Now that he was recultivating with his divine fetus, he was naturally able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. He didn't encounter any bottlenecks at all. However, he was still restricted by his cultivation level, so he couldn't truly activate the power of creation and destruction. However, there was already a faint saintly might exuding from his body. This was also the reason why he was able to subdue king tiers. Around him, there were a total of 23 king tiers standing respectfully on the floating boulder. Although they could only form a team of 12 at most, they could form 2 teams. They surrounded Gu Daoyi and guarded him with fervent expressions, as if he were a god. Gu Daoyi didn't even need to move. His 2 teams of bodyguards were more than enough to defeat his enemies. In fact, there was no lack of rank 2 king tiers among his followers. When he arrived at Ling Han's group, his gaze lingered on Empress Luanxing for a while longer. However, he didn't order his subordinates to charge over. There was no rush. Moreover, this kind of fruit should be personally plucked by him. Ling Han's group also had a surprisingly smooth journey. After all, the battle had only just begun, and there were many good and bad people mixed in. Many prodigies who weren't king tiers were also trying their luck. If they encountered king tiers, they would basically be defeated. As they climbed higher and higher, prey became more and more difficult to find. It was impossible for the weak to stand out. They continued to rise, only to be trampled down again and again. Those who could reach the highest point were naturally the true elites. At this moment, there were about 1,000 teams in the first echelon. Meanwhile, there were countless people below them who were still rushing upwards. This was because those who failed could start over. As long as there was enough time, they could send more people up. After reaching the same height as the valley, the first stage will be over. At that time, teams will no longer be allowed. It's said that no one has ever been able to climb the final 300 meters. According to the previous rules, when the first team or the first person reaches the same height as the valley, the competition in the sunken abyss valley will begin. There are only 3 days left. After 3 days, the person who stands at the highest point will be the champion of this competition. For a long time now, everyone has always been curious about what would happen if one managed to reach the top of that floating boulder. Or perhaps, they would obtain an unprecedented reward. It's a pity that no one has ever succeeded. The North Emperor and the Stone Emperor spoke in tandem. At this moment, they had already reached a height of 800 meters, and they weren't far from the top of the valley. This also signified that their alliance was about to come to an end. "Someone's coming," Nye Tianqing suddenly said as he walked forward, a murderous aura radiating from his body. Ling Han glanced at Nye Tianqing. However, he immediately extended a hand and blocked Nye Tianqing's path, saying, "This is my friend." There were 5 people in front of him, and he recognized 4 of them: Faceless, Yang Lin, Moon Shadow, and the Cloud Maiden. "Brother Ling," the 4 of them greeted him. Ling Han nodded and greeted them one by one as well. Their team of 5 wasn't particularly powerful, but they had Yang Lin with them. He was known as the favored child of the heavens, and he could pick up a saint tool whenever he went out. Thus, they had only encountered weaklings along the way, yet they had still managed to climb to this height. Ling Han felt that they shouldn't go any higher after reaching the height of 10,000 meters. This way, they could maintain the status of a team and protect each other, and they could also avoid clashing with top-tier king tiers. Once the 3 days were up, they would be able to obtain the blessing of heaven and earth once they reached the next step. In any case, the floating boulder had a range of 6 meters. They just had to make sure of this. Chapter 1449. Nye Tianqing was extremely displeased. Ling Han actually dared to stop him? They were competing for a great opportunity, not a place for him to reminisce about old times. His eyes were cold, but when he thought of his previous plan, he forcefully suppressed it. After he reached the height of the ravine, he would then strike Ling Han down into the ravine, causing him to fall from heaven to hell in an instant. This was the most despairing scenario. "Brother Ling, let's spar again later," Faceless said with a smile. Ever since he had a face, his expressions had also become more varied. "Sure." Ling Han nodded. Only then did Yang Lin and the others leave on their floating rocks. Everyone had worked hard to reach this height, and these teams were all very powerful now. Thus, no one would be willing to engage in battle easily. Even Gu Daoi didn't dare to boast that he could defeat all of the elites here. After all, the gap between their cultivation levels was too small. If he could defeat 10,000 people, he would definitely die quickly. However, there were some exceptions. Or rather, there was a dog. The large black dog had appeared. He naturally couldn't find anyone to team up with. If anyone teamed up with him, they would die under the gazes of 10,000 people, let alone being bitten in the butt by the large black dog. His battle style was surprisingly simple. He would simply ram into his opponents, and his opponents would definitely fall from their floating rocks. The large black dog's powerful physique and ability to ignore origin power allowed him to move like a fish in water. However, he had a nasty mouth. Even if he won, he still wanted to bite others. Not only did he want to bite others, but he also wanted to taunt them. This caused the people below to explode with rage. If it was possible to fly in the valley, there would definitely be tens of thousands of people chasing after the large black dog. A dog's life is truly as lonely as snow. Grandpa Dog is so powerful. I'm really embarrassed. The large black dog stood on the floating rock, looking as if he was giving orders. "People above, Grandpa Dog is here. Come and become Grandpa Dog's human pets. With a single sentence, he offended everyone. Even Gu Daoyi narrowed his eyes. He shifted his gaze away from Empress Luan Xing and looked at the large black dog. He had once lived 9 lives. Although all of them had been very short apart from his first life, he had still lived for 1 million years. Even after such a long time, he hadn't discovered anything special about the large black dog. However, after 9 lives, it seemed like the large black dog had also encountered a great opportunity. It was so miraculous that even he was slightly astonished. But it's just too cheap. Gu Daoyi definitely wouldn't allow such a despicable dog to follow him. He was someone who wanted to fight his way into the celestial realm and become a supreme being. However, if a large despicable dog followed by his side and attracted hatred everywhere, it would be strange if he didn't die quickly. After all, in the celestial region, he could not be considered an expert at all. Although the 9 reincarnations immortal fetus was extraordinary, with the strength of the celestial region, there were definitely strong constitutions that could rival the 9 reincarnations immortal fetus. He could only be considered one of the strongest physiques, but he was definitely not the only one. Don't worry about it. Quickly kill your way to the peak. Gu Daoyi said. His gaze was fixed on the gigantic golden boulder in the sky. He had a feeling that if he could ascend to the top, he would be able to obtain massive benefits. To be able to elicit such a reaction from a former immortal like him, he was naturally determined to obtain it. After a short period of peace, war broke out again. A team of 12 people charged over, and they immediately attacked without any hesitation. Nie Tiancheng and Shan Jingyi charged over, yet they were unable to gain the upper hand even after summoning their god tools. Instead, they were fiercely suppressed. After all, their opponents were also extremely powerful. Moreover, they had the advantage in numbers. The North Emperor and Stone Emperor hurriedly charged over. Even so, they were still at a disadvantage. The Rain Emperor was itching to fight, and he roared as he also joined the battle. Seeing his 2 eager disciples, Ling Han smiled and nodded. Ding Ping and Zhu Yao also charged over. Ding Ping was the representative of the pinnacle level of force. At the same cultivation level, no one would be able to compete with him in terms of strength. His fist was imbued with heavy crushing power, and it was at least 1 star more powerful than rank 3 king tiers. Meanwhile, Zhu Yao walked a strange path. The 9 divine patterns on his arms lit up, and they transformed into 9 powerful demonic beasts. Each of these demonic beasts was as powerful as him, and the 10 of them teamed up to increase their battle prowess by 1 star. At first glance, they were not as powerful as Ding Ping, but the 9 demonic beasts were all undying existences, and Zhu Yao could also transform into mist. Their defensive abilities were not something Ding Ping could compare to. Thus, if one wanted to say which of the 2 was stronger, it would not be easy to determine just based on power and cultivation. However, in the battles in the Sunken Abyss Valley, it was clear that the higher one's offensive prowess was, the more advantageous it would be. This was because no matter how powerful one's defenses were, it would still be very difficult to protect the floating rock beneath one's feet. Take Ling Han for example. He could allow all of the king tiers in the valley to attack him, and it was guaranteed that he wouldn't be harmed at all. However, the same couldn't be said for the floating rock beneath his feet. The Rain Emperor walked a domineering path. He didn't care about his opponent's feet at all. Instead, he focused on attacking his opponents. If he defeated his opponents, the floating rock would naturally belong to him. However, this was definitely many times more difficult than defeating his opponents. However, the Rain Emperor was extremely willful. This caused Nie Tiancheng and Shan Jingyi to be extremely displeased. However, they couldn't free themselves to do anything at this moment, so they couldn't express their feelings at all. Su Ran and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden also joined the battle. The notionless saint had a high status, so he naturally couldn't be bothered to fight with these juniors. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing were in charge of the overall situation. They could provide reinforcements if anyone was in danger. However, this was enough. Although there were fewer people participating in the battle, they were more powerful. The Rain Emperor was the first to show his might, and he blasted his opponent off the floating rock. Once this gap was opened, The remaining people were defeated like a mountain. Those who were defeated, and those whose floating rocks were shattered, helping Ling Han and the others. However, even though they had defeated such powerful opponents, they had only ascended 9 meters. From this, it could be seen just how difficult it was to ascend 300 meters after entering the second stage. This wasn't a matter of defeating 30 or 50 people. Rather, it was an exponential matter. This was because the opponents that one had to defeat would also have to step over a similar number of corpses to ascend. Although there would be an endless stream of people climbing up from below, there was only a mere 3 days' time. This was evident from the fact that no one had ascended the floating golden rock for countless years. Humph! The two of you are so arrogant. The others have already moved, so why haven't the two of you moved? After the battle ended, Nie Tiancheng immediately flew into a rage at Ling Han and the notionless saint. Ding Ping and Jiu Yao immediately took a step forward and stood in front of Ling Han. They glowered at Nie Tiancheng. Firstly, the battle has already been resolved. Secondly, does our master need to personally move? They said arrogantly. Nie Tiancheng was instantly enraged. Ling Han was far too arrogant. He had actually used his 2 disciples to deal with him. However, he could clearly tell that these 2 had just advanced to the heavenly body tier. In the outside world, he could suppress them with a single hand. Yet in this place, even though he had a pseudo-saint tool, he still wasn't completely confident that he could defeat them. After all, he had seen their strength just then. In a 1 versus 2 situation, he truly had no chance of victory. Chapter 1450. Meanwhile, Shan Jingyi stood with Nie Tiancheng and said, "Won't we be able to end this battle faster if we attack together? Don't forget, we're a team, and we have to think about the bigger picture." Ding Ping and Jiu Yao wanted to say something else, but Ling Han patted their shoulders and said, "All right, think about the bigger picture. I'll attack in the next battle." Shan Jingyi and Nie Tiancheng exchanged a glance, both feeling elated that their scheme had succeeded. If they wanted to target Ling Han, they had to understand Ling Han's strength. Only by knowing oneself and one's enemy could one emerge victorious in battle. Moreover, both of his disciples were so ferocious, so how could he be a simple master? The 2 of them didn't want to be dragged into this mess. If Ling Han was too strong, they would choose to endure. Ling Han smiled faintly. He could clearly read their thoughts. During the next battle, Ling Han attacked as expected. With a casual flick of his finger, sword chi surged. This could be seen as a good fulcrum, but if one had to say what was special about him, it couldn't be seen at all. The notionless saint was itching to fight, and he couldn't help but join the battle. However, he didn't use his saint aura. This was a trump card, and he wouldn't use it unless it was absolutely necessary. Only Empress Luan Xing didn't join the battle. However, she was a peerless beauty, and everyone admired her. Who would blame her? 8,000 meters, 9,000 meters, 9,000 meters. After reaching this height, there were even fewer teams. There were only about 100 teams left. Theoretically speaking, only 5 or 6 teams would be able to reach the top of the valley in the shortest time possible. Everyone became even more cautious. These 100 or so teams had all killed their way out of a massive army, so which one of them wasn't powerful? If they encountered a powerful enemy, they would fall to the bottom of the valley and have to fight their way back up. Die. After a short standoff, a chaotic battle erupted again. Ling Han and the others finally encountered a powerful team. Empress Luan Xing didn't attack, and Ling Han didn't use his full strength. The battle was extremely tense, and it took a long time before a victor was finally decided. The other side lost. Ling Han's team had risen by 1 level, and then Gu Daoi's 2 teams had also risen by 1 level, showing that their battle prowess was even stronger. At this time, the team of top-tier kings finally stood out. Zi Chenfeng, the North Emperor, said as he looked into the distance. There was a team of 7, and there was a young man in the middle who had a head of elegant purple hair. He even had a pair of horns on his head, and it was hard to tell what he looked like. However, it did not affect his handsome appearance in the slightest. A few thousand years ago, I fought with him and was defeated in 1 move. Ling Han nodded and said, He has reached the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. If their cultivation levels were equal, it would be impossible for anyone to defeat the North Emperor with a single strike. Long Xiangyue, Nye Tiancheng, on the other hand, looked in another direction. His pupils had contracted, and cold sweat had actually appeared on his forehead. It was a woman with an incomparably enchanting figure. She was clad in golden scale armor and wore a dragon helmet. Her beautiful hair was coiled into a bun under the helmet, and one could vaguely see that she was full of heroic spirit and exuded astonishing vitality. She was like a humanoid true dragon. She was alone with her sword, and she actually did not have a team or a follower. She appeared to be an independent person. Second in the world. Shan Jingyi exclaimed in astonishment. This was another rank 3 king tier, and she stood at the apex of the current prodigies. Ling Han walked over. Second in the world definitely could not be called a handsome man, but he was extremely tall, taller than the average person by a head. His figure was sturdy, and his skin was tanned. His arms were covered with thick hair, and his face was covered with a beard. At first glance, he really did look like a black bear that had stood on its hind legs. However, from his appearance, he did not have the bearing of an elite at all. He was neither graceful nor agile. If he stood on the streets, anyone would think that he was a boorish commoner. Yet this was a top-tier king tier. The name, second in the world, was enough to explain everything. Second in the world was not alone. Rather, he had a team with him. However, to his surprise, his team was actually made up of an army of beautiful women. Moreover, they were all as beautiful as flowers, causing him to appear completely out of place. Putting aside the fact that a flower had been stuck in a pile of cow dung, this was still a scene of beauties and beasts. "Why isn't Empress Luan Xing here?" the Stone Emperor murmured. He had never seen the Empress before, and Ling Han and the others had not introduced her either. Thus, he was still searching everywhere, yet none of them matched the rumors. The North Emperor, Nye Tiancheng, and the others were also searching, yet their expressions were similarly blank. It was dark under the light, so they did not suspect that Empress Luan Xing was actually right under their noses. Xiu. Long Xiangyue was the first to attack. She charged toward a team of 12 teams. As long as she defeated them, she would be able to obtain 12 floating stones in one go, and she would immediately be able to ascend to the top. Humph. Even if you're a rank 3 king tier, it's impossible for you to win when you're outnumbered. That team started to counterattack. They were all rank 2 king tiers, and they all wielded powerful treasures. In fact, some of these treasures were not inferior to Nye Tiancheng's Holy Peach Branch or Shan Jingyi's 6 Elements Mountain replica. Long Xiangyue slashed out with her sword, and it was as if a celestial maiden had descended from the heavens, exuding a boundless aura of spirituality. She was incredibly powerful, and she charged toward the front. The scales on her body glowed, and it was as if her helmet had come to life. It actually transformed into a true dragon's head, and as it roared, a dragon's might radiated from its body. Even Supreme King tiers felt pressured by its might. True dragons could reach the Genesis tier as soon as they matured, and they possessed the most powerful bloodline in the immortal realm. One man and one sword, incomparably domineering, slaughtered the group of 12 people until not a single one was left. She forcefully snatched 12 floating stones, and her figure immediately rose into the air. She was the first to ascend to the top of the valley. An hourglass diagram instantly appeared on the golden floating stone at the top, and there was golden sand flowing within it. Some people had broken through the first stage, and they were now fighting to advance to the second stage. However, Long Xiangyue couldn't ascend anymore. This was because there was no one around her who was at the same level as her. Even if she were 6 meters lower than the others, and the others were 6 meters higher, they would only be able to close the gap between them by about 4 meters. She could only wait. The other teams also began to battle. The countdown had already begun, so they couldn't afford to wait any longer. Which of the king tiers that had come here didn't have the ambition to ascend to the top of that golden stone? After a series of intense battles, the teams that had supreme king tiers continued to ascend, and they all charged to the top of the mountain. At this moment, all of the teams had dispersed. It could be seen that the floating stones beneath their feet would begin to crumble if two people approached each other. If they didn't fight, they would only be able to take each other down with them. In this way, it was practically impossible for them to join forces. Nie Tiancheng and Shan Jingyi exchanged a glance before suddenly unleashing attacks at the floating stone beneath Ling Han's feet. They had endured for so long just for this moment. They couldn't wait to see the astonished expression on Ling Han's face. It would definitely be a beautiful sight. Ling Han suddenly turned around, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Chapter 1452. Gu Daoyi was enraged. He was originally a prodigy of the celestial realm, and now that he had fallen to the immortal realm, he still thought highly of himself and had a strong sense of superiority. In his eyes, the immortal realm was a backward and primitive place. This sense of superiority was like the prodigies of the immortal realm to the cultivators of a small world. And now, an ant from the lower realm actually repeatedly provoked him, like a mortal challenging the might of heaven. How could he not be enraged? Erase. He humphed, and an aura of primal chaos flowed around his body. Images of stars appeared behind him, and he stood proudly like a god, as if he could crush a star with a single step. Ignorant ant, you actually dare to challenge my authority. He stretched out a large hand and tapped out with a finger. His origin power condensed into a frightening regulations, transforming into a finger. However, this finger was 300 meters long and 90 meters thick, and it was majestically pressing down on Ling Han. Multiple divine patterns appeared on this towering finger, and the aura it exuded completely surpassed the low extreme and medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, and even reached the level of the high extreme. One had to realize that everyone's cultivation level had been suppressed to the early stage of the low extreme, but the might of his strike reached the high extreme. How many stars did his battle prowess surpass? When this strike was unleashed, everyone's expression changed. How could he be so powerful? From the early stage of the low extreme to the high extreme, even if they were both in the early stage, that was a whole 8 stars of battle prowess. This should not happen, unless it was the suppression of the pinnacle level, but how could it be now? This was Gu Daoyi, the greatest prodigy of all time. How could Ling Han block it? Even if Ling Han could block it, how could the floating rock under his feet be safe? This strike was definitely unsolvable. Everyone shook their heads. Being able to enter the first echelon, these 10 people were all fully deserving of being kings among kings, but compared to Gu Daoyi, they all paled in comparison. They were not on the same level at all. It's over. If he doesn't want to die, he can only give up on the floating rock under his feet. Otherwise, there will be no place to hide. Who asked him to provoke Gu Daoyi? If he kept a low profile and pulled away from Gu Daoyi, even if he couldn't reach the top, he could at least make it to the front. I think it was Gu Daoyi who provoked him first, right? What kind of person is Gu Daoyi? He naturally has the right to be arrogant. If Ling Han knows his own limitations, he should choose to retreat, and not oppose him with equal harshness. So, he asked for it. Let's start again. A considerable number of people were making sarcastic remarks. They were all communicating with their divine sense. This was very fast. Otherwise, Gu Daoyi's attack would have already arrived by the time they opened their mouths. However, Ling Han's actions surprised everyone because he didn't jump off the floating rock to protect himself. Instead, he raised his hand and pressed it towards the giant's finger. Crazy, everyone had the same thought when they saw this scene. This wasn't something that a cultivator at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier could block. Blocking it head-on would be courting death. Many people shook their heads. Ling Han was really too unwise. He actually dared to show such bravery. This wasn't just seeking death, but dying from stupidity. Boom! Ling Han's attack that seemed like it was sweeping away a speck of dust had already clashed with the towering finger. The giant finger was visibly corroding at an astonishing speed, and when it truly landed on Ling Han's body, it had already crumbled on its own. Seeing this, everyone's mouths were wide open, and they were completely speechless. Just then, they had said that Gu Daoyi's attack was definitely unmatched by any cultivator at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier, but in the blink of an eye, Ling Han had given them a heavy slap. Easily neutralized. So many years had passed, and Ling Han had continuously cultivated under the reincarnation tree, drinking who knew how much reincarnation tea, and his grasp of Tide of the Ages had already reached a level as pure as fire. Even if he didn't have the bloodline of the Ding clan, in terms of using Tide of the Ages, he definitely surpassed the majority of the members of the Ding clan. Gu Daoyi also showed an expression of shock. Though that finger hadn't been his full power, he was a prodigy of the celestial realm, and now he was also a divine fetus that had been formed by burying 9 lives, so his battle prowess should be invincible in the immortal realm at the same cultivation level. This is the power of time. He carefully recalled, and the shock on his face involuntarily became even more intense. Though Ling Han's grasp of the power of time could only be said to be superficial, an ant from the lower realm actually being able to touch the height of the regulations of time? This was unimaginable to him. Even in the celestial realm, apart from bloodline inheritances, only those that had advanced to the severing mundane tier were qualified to touch this kind of supreme regulations. Could it be that Ling Han possessed the bloodline of the celestial realm, and was like him, exiled from the celestial realm? Not bad, not bad. If not, how could he know of the existence of the celestial realm? No wonder he dared to challenge him, so it turned out that he also came from the celestial realm. Humph, you've only grasped a little bit of the power of time, and you want to stop me? Gu Daoyi said menacingly. There was a look of disdain on his face, but a sense of alarm rose up in his heart. The power of time was extraordinary. In a battle of equals, he had to show his true strength. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You've been lying for a few 100 million years, so you really have a lot to say." Gu Daoyi's expression involuntarily darkened. This mouth was really venomous. He had cultivated to the 10th life, and his mentality had also become younger, so he was more easily provoked. His eyes involuntarily narrowed, and killing intent circulated. "You insist on seeking your own death." He steered the floating rock and charged towards Ling Han. Another finger was pointed out, and the tip of his finger was as red as blood, incredibly beautiful. Blood God finger. Ling Han did as before, and flicked out another Tide of the Ages. However, he immediately discovered that the might of his opponent's attack was incredibly condensed, as if a mountain had been compressed into the size of an egg. Thus, the surface that was affected by the Tide of the Ages had also become very, very small. Thus, when the outer shell of this finger was continuously peeled off, and finally only a small dot was left, the might of the Tide of the Ages had also completely disappeared. However, this tiny dot exploded with a terrifying destructive power. Boom! This strike landed on Ling Han's body, and forcibly sent him flying back several hundred meters. However, when he arrived at the edge of the valley, his figure stopped. There was an invisible barrier blocking him. Gu Daoyi showed an expression of arrogance. Did Ling Han think that he had no way to deal with this kind of superficial power of time? What a joke! He had grasped who knew how many powerful secret techniques, and they were all at the level of the celestial realm. His foundation was unimaginably powerful. But in the next instant, the arrogance on his face suddenly turned into astonishment. That was because Ling Han had stretched his muscles, and looked as if he was completely fine. If this attack had been aimed at the floating rock beneath his feet, then Ling Han would definitely have been knocked down. However, if it was the person who had attacked him, then how could the power of someone at the low extreme possibly wound him? Even if it was a technique from the celestial realm, it would still be impossible. That was because the indestructible heaven scroll was also from the celestial realm, and its level was even higher. Chapter 1453. Gu Daoyi was astonished. The blood god finger was an ultimate technique that he had cultivated in his second life, condensing all his power into a single attack. With Ling Han's mere superficial time secret technique, it was impossible for him to completely disperse it. This was indeed as he had expected, but could this guy's body be forged from divine metal? Even Gu Daoyi could not imagine how there could be such a freakish physique in this world, causing him to involuntarily be moved and pale. Holy shit, I must be seeing things, right? That brat endured such a terrifying attack from Gu Daoyi, and is actually completely unscathed? No, 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 he's still injured. Bullshit, it's just a little blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. How can that be considered an injury? Everyone below clutched their heads. Even Gu Daoi's ultimate technique couldn't severely wound him, so what level had Ling Han's physique reached? Ling Han wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. After all, it was Gu Daoi. Even if his cultivation level had been reduced, this attack still caused a certain amount of damage to him. After all, the strength of his physique had also been reduced along with his cultivation level. However, this kind of injury was completely insignificant. With a flick of his fingers, countless flashes of sword chi crisscrossed, slashing towards Gu Daoi. Lightning sword technique. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Each flash of sword chi was incredibly fast, instantly causing Gu Daoi to look disheveled. He continuously parried, but when these flashes of sword chi dissipated, there were also a few tears on his clothes, and a few strands of hair had also been cut off. There was also a wound on his cheek, from which blood seeped out. Gu Daoi was also injured. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but exclaim, and Gu Daoi's followers were incredibly furious, wanting nothing more than to step into the sky and crush Ling Han into pieces. In their hearts, Gu Daoi was a god that could only be worshipped. That was Gu Daoi, hailed as the strongest prodigy since ancient times, but in a situation where their cultivation level was completely the same, he was actually injured. They exchanged blows, and no one suffered a loss. Ling Han was also very fierce. Only at this moment did a portion of people finally lean towards Ling Han. Even if they did not think that he could win, he at least had the qualifications to stand against Gu Daoi. He was the strongest king tier of the current younger generation. Gu Daoi wiped his cheek. His blood had congealed and did not dissolve, and was like droplets of pearls. The bloodstains on his hand grew colder and colder. After descending from the celestial realm, he had recultivated 8 lifetimes, and in each lifetime, he had successfully reached the peak stage of the Genesis tier, and had not encountered the slightest bit of setback. How many years had it been since he had been wounded by someone? He had buried his body for 9 lives, and it took him 10 lives to become an immortal embryo. He also cultivated the arts of the immortal realms. No matter how one looked at it, he should be invincible among those at the same level as him. Even in the immortal realms, he was confident that at most, there would only be geniuses at the same level as him who could fight against him. But as for those geniuses who could defeat him, that was absolutely impossible. However, in the god realm, which he had thought to be primitive, a person who could rival him had appeared. Moreover, this person had not even cultivated to the 3rd supreme realm. In theory, this person was slightly inferior to him in terms of power and the use of laws. Wouldn't that mean that he would lose in a battle between equals? Gu Daoi turned to Ling Han again, and used his divine sense to send a message. I have cultivated a divine fetus for 10 lifetimes from my body for 9 lives, and have cultivated a supreme mystical power in each lifetime. How many mystical powers can you block from me? Bring it on. Ling Han laughed loudly. He flipped his hands, and multiple bursts of sword chi shot out, slicing towards Gu Daoi. He was also very conceited. Since Gu Daoi did not use a weapon, he, too, put away the divine demon sword. Heavens will saber! Gu Daoi's expression suddenly froze. His whole body exuded a cold saber intent, as if he had transformed into a supreme divine saber that could cut through everything. There was a smile on Ling Han's face, but a strong sense of wariness rose up in his heart. For example, if one traced back to their origins, Empress Luan Xing and Faceless could both be related to the celestial realm. They were the descendants of elites who had been exiled from the celestial realm, and had the blood of the celestial realm flowing in their veins, so they could use the techniques of the celestial realm. But compared to Gu Daoi, they were far inferior. He was an elite of the celestial realm. It was just that he had buried himself, and lived one life after another. With each life, he would change his bloodline once, and cultivate an additional mystical power. Though Ling Han did not know the principle behind this, it should be related to the 9 Deaths Heaven art. This was a living elite of the celestial realm. It was just that his cultivation level had been suppressed now, but his foundation was even more solid, and his physique was incredibly strong. The secret technique that he used definitely could not be underestimated. The truth was also so. A supreme divine saber appeared above Gu Daoi's head. It was as long as 30,000 meters, and as black as ink. A single glance would cause one's mind to tremble, as if their soul was about to be sucked out of their body. The heavens will saber represented that when the heavens struck you, it would not harm your physical body, but only your spirit. All lives extinguish. Gu Daoi pointed a finger at Ling Han. Shua, the divine saber slashed out. It represented the Tao of heaven and earth, and nothing could block it. Ling Han used the tide of the ages, but a celestial technique against a celestial technique. The tide of the ages was also unable to compete. This divine saber was only weakened by 30%, and it still slashed down on him with great momentum and might. This was very normal. Celestial techniques could be said to be invincible in the immortal realm, but in the celestial realm, there would definitely be countless techniques that could match it. Otherwise, wouldn't the Ding clan be able to dominate the celestial realm? Boom, the saber slashed down. It was incredibly inconceivable. At present, the saber that was still 70,000 to 80,000 meters long actually slashed into Ling Han's body, and then disappeared without a trace. This was not material but rather heaven's will. It was naturally formless, and what it struck was the spirit. Ha! Gu Daoi laughed loudly. Struck by the heavens will saber, then there naturally would not be the slightest bit of his spirit left. It would all be destroyed, and from now on, there would no longer be a person called Ling Han in this world. He felt slightly regretful. Before he came, Ling Han should also be a member of the celestial realm. Even if he did not directly come from the celestial realm like him, he would at least be a descendant of those who had been exiled from the celestial realm at the time, so it could be said that they had the same origin. If possible, he actually very much wanted to subdue Ling Han and have him follow him, and witness him establishing supreme dominance after he entered into the celestial realm in the future. Because they were both exiled, this kind of feeling of approval made him feel even more comfortable. The others, however, were confused. How could such a powerful saber slash pass so calmly? That is a saber that slashes one's spirit. It seems incredibly large, but is actually formless, so it naturally will not cause any great commotion, a powerful figure spoke up to explain. That was a representative that the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy had sent out, an Eternal River Tier elite. When these words were said, everyone was stunned. It should be known that even in the immortal realm, everyone basically cultivated the power of their physical body. As for their spirit, they would indeed cultivate, but their main focus was to strengthen it so that it could keep up with their cultivation level, but they would not deliberately increase the strength of their spirit. In other words, if they encountered Gu Daoi, then it was possible that even if 100 of them joined forces, it would still be useless. A single heavens will saber slash over, and they would all become empty shells. Sigh, that guy is actually very extraordinary, but he was actually killed just like that. There is one less Supreme King tier. What a pity. That's not right. If this guy died, shouldn't the floating rock under his feet have been absorbed by Gu Daoi? Someone suddenly called out. Gasp. Everyone's eyes widened, and they once again stared at Ling Han. Fuck, don't tell me that this guy is not dead yet. Chapter 1454. A good story. Under the gazes of the crowd, Ling Han smiled and calmly said, "So this is the heavens will saber? Interesting, it's giving me a slight headache." Pooh. Everyone spluttered, feeling incredibly incredulous. Though there were very few people who cultivated divine sense attacks, this did not prevent them from judging the might of divine sense attacks. Gu Daoi's heavens will saber was 30,000 meters long, and just a glance was enough to make one's soul scatter. This kind of attack had to be incredibly terrifying. But when this saber slashed down, Ling Han actually only felt a slight headache. Fuck, not only is this guy's physique monstrous, his spirit is also monstrous. Even Long Xiangyue, Zi Chenfeng, and the other Supreme King tiers looked serious. They definitely did not want to encounter a guy with freakish defenses like Ling Han. If they really encountered him, then their target would be the floating rock beneath Ling Han's feet, and they would definitely not attack him personally. In terms of offensive power, they were no match for Gu Daoyi. Gu Daoyi's laughter naturally stopped. He withdrew his smile and stared at Ling Han for a long time before saying, "Then take this supreme mystical power that I cultivated in my fourth lifetime, raging flames incinerate the heavens." Boom, endless flames surged out of his body, turning into a vast ocean. However, what was incredibly strange was that even though this kind of sea of flames could spread out endlessly in all directions, the distance between the top and bottom was definitely 6 meters. In other words, Gu Daoyi could not attack those above or below 6 meters. This kind of flames was extremely terrifying. Even Zi Chenfeng, second in the world, Hong Ma, and the others were unwilling to face Gu Daoyi at this moment. They all moved faster, snatching a floating rock and increasing their altitude. In the sea of flames, monsters appeared one after another. They were all formed from divine patterns and had strange appearances. Most of them were things that Ling Han had never seen before. This was a celestial technique, so it was very likely that these monsters were beasts from the celestial realm. Ling Han, however, broke into a smile. It should be known that he had comprehended the profound mystery of rising from the ashes in the immortal flames. And those were not ordinary immortal flames either. They were the flames that burned the body of an immortal phoenix. It was impossible for him to scatter the immortal flames. However, it was too easy for him to protect himself. He could already become one with the immortal flames. No matter how fierce the flames were, they wouldn't be able to harm him. It was as if he was bathing in a warm pond, only comfortable and comfortable, he wouldn't be harmed at all. He released his origin power to protect the floating rock beneath his feet. Then he charged toward Gu Daoyi. Below, everyone was so shocked that they felt their scalps go numb. Just a glance at those flames would cause goosebumps to crawl on their skin. Who wouldn't be able to defend with all their might after being surrounded? That's because it would definitely be extremely exhausting to spread out such a sea of flames. Therefore, defending was the best method. Once the other party's energy was exhausted, they would launch a counterattack. But Ling Han, on the other hand, braved the flames and attacked. I really don't know if I should call him brave or stupid. No, he seems to be really confident. Heavens, it seems like flames can't hurt him. Why do I have a feeling that these flames are getting closer to him? This enemy's flames can also create intimacy. This fellow is definitely a monster. A monster among monsters. Since it was an attack unleashed by an opponent, then no matter how weak this attack was, it could only be ignored or destroyed. How could it possibly be intimate? This was illogical. Even Gu Daoyi's eyes widened, and he truly wanted to call him a monster. Ling Han arrived and shot out a punch. He didn't have as many tricks as Gu Daoyi. Though it was a punch, what burst forth was not fist power, but endless sword intent. I am the sword. This was the inspiration that Ling Han had obtained from that Heaven's Will saber just now. Sword Dao didn't need to be limited to the sword. Any technique was only a form. Only power and regulations were the foundation. Since that's the case, why should I care how this strike was unleashed? He had a kind of comprehension, and his sword intent also became more condensed as if it had undergone some kind of transformation. Gu Daoyi was really shocked this time. You can still comprehend in the middle of battle? This brat's talent was inferior to his, and his physique was inferior to his. It could be said that all of his natural conditions were inferior to his, but his comprehension was really too frightening. It caused even him to feel a chill. In the celestial realm, cultivators had an unlimited lifespan. As long as they weren't tormented to death by heaven's decline, they would have enough time to temper their origin power and perfect themselves. However, the only thing that couldn't be compensated for was comprehension. In other words, prodigies like him only had a high starting point and a fast sprint, and could very quickly leave others in the dust. However, cultivation wasn't a short sprint, but rather a long run. In fact, there was no end to it. After running a certain distance, he would slow down. That was because on the supreme path, it wasn't a competition of physique or talent, but rather one's comprehension of the wonders of heaven and earth. Those with high comprehension would be able to catch up from behind, equal, or even surpass. Such a person couldn't be allowed to live. Gu Daoi's killing intent blazed even more. His path as a king tier definitely wouldn't allow any competitors, or even those who stole his path. Mystical power of the fifth life, Skyward Staff. He gave a battle cry, and his origin power condensed, forming a golden staff in his hand. He smashed it heavily at Ling Han. Meanwhile, the sea of flames was instantly withdrawn. He still didn't have the ability to use two ultimate mystical powers at the same time. Below, everyone had already become numb from watching. As expected of Gu Daoi, every secret technique he used had boundless might. Others only needed to grasp a single one, and they would be able to look down on the whole world. However, for him, this seemed to be far from the limit. Boom, the staff smashed into the sky, shattering the heavens and shattering the earth. This is a completely domineering path, and doesn't care about empty words. With a strike of my staff, even the heaven and earth will shatter, and everything will be flattened. The Rain Emperor couldn't help but feel an itch in his hands. He really wanted Ling Han to step aside so that he could fight to his heart's content. Ling Han was also filled with heroic spirit, and said, "This is what you call a battle." He raised his hand, and similarly condensed poly power, forming a sword that clashed with the Skyward Staff. Boom! The sword and staff collided, instantly creating a terrifying impact that blasted out in all directions. However, the area above and below them was limited to a space of 6 meters, and couldn't be crossed. Ling Han and Gu Daoi's hair fluttered, and their clothes also fluttered loudly. However, neither of them took a single step back. Even if Gu Daoi was a rank 3 king tier, his cultivation level had been suppressed, so he wasn't much stronger than Ling Han. It could be seen as a battle of equal strength. Ping! Pung! The two of them retreated at the same time, and the closer they got, the floating rocks under their feet began to crumble. If a little more time passed, and the victors still hadn't been decided, then they would die together, and fall into the valley together. Obviously, it was impossible for a victor to be decided in a short period of time. Naturally, they could only separate. Ling Han laughed loudly, and waved his hands repeatedly. One after another, flashes of sword light shot out, forming a vast ocean that surged towards Gu Daoi. Gu Daoi's eyes widened and he said, "Are you the only one who knows how to use a sword?" He, too, formed a sword with his hands and attacked towards Ling Han. Mystical power of the sixth life, Flying Flower Sword. Chapter 1456. Gu Daoi had extraordinary looks, and was born with a natural aura of Tao, as if he was the favored child of heaven and earth. Could such a person be a creature of the netherworld? Definitely not. If he wasn't a creature of the netherworld, how could he possibly use the techniques of the netherworld? The regulations of the two realms were incompatible, and mastering one side's techniques meant being rejected by the other realm. No one could have both. Everyone was shocked. Though the techniques that Gu Daoi had used before were different, they were all clear and pure, and were of the immortal realm. Simultaneously mastering the techniques of two realms? Gasp. No wonder this person could become the strongest king tier. Just ask the world, was there a second person who could simultaneously master the techniques of two realms? Ling Han wasn't moved. To break into the celestial realm, the prerequisite was to simultaneously master the regulations of creation and destruction. Since Gu Daoi came from the celestial realm, then what was strange about him mastering the techniques of two realms? Darkness covered the sky. Though it could only cover an area of 6 meters, within this area, there was complete darkness, and hundreds of ghosts walked in the night. Ling Han humphed and said, "Demons and monsters, why haven't you dissipated yet?" He released the light of lightning, crackling, and the hundreds of ghosts were all shattered into pieces. This move seemed powerful, but in reality, it was only strong on the outside. It wasn't Gu Daoi's fault, because this was the immortal realm. If you used the techniques of the netherworld here, not only would it not be boosted by the heaven and earth, it would instead be weakened, and added with the power of lightning, it was naturally even more useless. This everyone's lips twitched. Though Gu Daoi's moves were endless, none of them were effective. Ling Han dealt with them with a single move no matter how he tossed and turned, dealing with myriad changes by remaining unchanged. Mystical power of the ninth life, 8 doors. Gu Dao changed again and pointed with his right hand. Multiple doors appeared around Ling Han. There was a total of 8 layers, and each door exuded a different colored light. They spun slightly, releasing different auras. Strangle! Gu Dao flipped his hand, and the 8 doors opened wide. Endless killing intent surged out, wanting to grind Ling Han into pieces. Formations! Ling Han couldn't help but be surprised. Gu Dao really had a wide range of knowledge, and also had extremely high attainment in formations. But he was fearless. You're just constantly changing techniques, but you're not increasing the power of each technique. What's the point of changing over and over again? Wait, was Gu Dao such a stupid person? Ling Han felt a chill in his heart. Be on your guard. When Ling Han struck out with his sword, the world was at peace. Mystical power of the first life, dazzle the world. Gu Dao didn't seem to care in the slightest. He had come here to show off his ultimate technique. His whole person had transformed into a god of light, and was 100 times brighter than the sun. He pressed his palm down, and with a rumble, he purified everything. This was the innate art of his first life, and also the one he lived the longest. This was the life he cultivated in the immortal realms. Hence, this strike was clearly much stronger compared to the previous 8 secret arts, causing even Ling Han to furrow his brows. Ling Han let out a long howl and slashed out with his sword. The tide of the ages had already fused with the lightning sword technique to a considerable degree. True enough, battle was the best way to improve. Without the pressure from Gu Dao, it was possible that Ling Han would need several hundred years to reach his current level, even if he was under the reincarnation tree. Boom! After a single strike, both Ling Han and Gu Dao were sent flying back at the same time, but it was still difficult to determine the victor. Yet Gu Dao broke into a strange smile. You must be very curious. It's obvious that these techniques can't have any effect, so why do I have to use them one by one? Heh, how would I know what your ass is thinking? Ling Han said smilingly. Gu Dao instantly exploded in anger. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he forcibly suppressed his anger. He said, because all of this is for the sake of the mystical power that I have cultivated in my 10th life. All of this was done through his divine sense. He didn't want others to know about his greatest trump card. Mystical power of 10 lives, 9 lives returned to 1. Gu Dao's figure trembled, and a person actually walked out from his body. Then, with another tremble, a second person walked out, and then a third, a fourth, all the way until there was a 9th. Including himself, there were a total of 10 people. These were the bodies of his first and last 10 lives. Through the mystical power of his 10th life, he had summoned the bodies of his 9 lives. These 10 people looked completely different. Thankfully, this was still affected by Gu Dao's own cultivation level. These 9 people's cultivation level was equal to his. Otherwise, if he summoned 9 saints, who in this world could stop him? But this was already frightening enough. The mystical powers that the bodies of his 9 lives had grasped were all incredibly powerful. Now that the bodies of his 9 lives had appeared, what did this mean? That these mystical powers and secret techniques could be used at the same time? Below, everyone's eyes widened in shock. If one couldn't defeat him, then he'd summon 9 to do it together. Who could stand this? Gu Dao roared loudly. The bodies of his 9 lives also roared, and each used a mystical power. They were the blood god's finger, the heavens will saber, the skyward staff, the 100 ghosts parade, and so on. They all blasted towards Ling Han. With all 10 lives, who in this world could match him? Long Xiangfeng frowned, Zi Chenfeng frowned, Hong Ma frowned, Cheng Xiaofan frowned, and second in the world frowned. Only the Rain Emperor revealed an excited fighting spirit. His fighting spirit became stronger when he encountered a stronger opponent, and he had completely cast aside the thought of victory and defeat. Meanwhile, Empress Luanxing's slender figure trembled slightly. This was a technique that had evolved from the 9 Deaths Heaven art. For example, she could form 9 doppelgangers, but Gu Dao had 9 bodies. They were 2 different paths, yet they could be fused, causing her to become even stronger. Of course, this was also the case for Gu Dao. If he could form 9 more doppelgangers, he would naturally be even more terrifying. Endless secret techniques surged over, so how could Ling Han block them? If it was 1 or even 2, Ling Han could still match, but 9, no matter how he thought about it, it was impossible. Ling Han showed a calm smile. His right hand shook, and shwa, the divine demon sword was tossed out by him, slashing towards Gu Daoyi. Gu Daoyi was completely unafraid. 10 lives had appeared at the same time, and this was his strongest state. Within the same cultivation level, no one could match him. His main body stretched out a hand, grabbing towards the divine demon sword. With his vision, he could naturally see that this sword was extraordinary and instantly thought of taking it for himself. However, he had just stretched out his hand when he saw the divine demon sword sink and actually slash towards his feet. It slashed in the wrong direction, right? However, he immediately understood that this strike of Ling Han's wasn't aimed at him, but rather at the floating rock beneath his feet. Fuck! Despicable! Gu Daoyi roared and hurriedly spread out his origin power, shielding the floating rock. The divine demon sword slashed down, releasing endless divine light. This was a future celestial tool who could block a strike from it. As the sword descended, the origin power shield was completely useless. The divine demon sword broke through and slashed onto the floating rock. How domineering was the celestial sword? The floating rock was instantly shattered. Fuck! Gu Daoyi released a roar filled with indignation and fury. Boom! His body rapidly plummeted. An elite like him, a prodigy, a king tier, should not care about any kind of honor or disgrace, because he stood at the peak of this world. However, Ling Han's method was really too unreasonable, and he couldn't help but lose his composure and curse. It could be seen just how furious he was. He had been tricked. Chapter 1457. As Gu Daoyi's main body descended, the bodies of his 9 lives naturally descended as well. Just as their attacks were about to land on Ling Han, they all fell together. The threat naturally dissipated on its own. Seeing this, everyone sympathized with Gu Daoyi very much. If they were in his position, they would also curse. Who said that Ling Han only knew a single move? If he used another move, Gu Daoyi would be defeated in an instant. If Ling Han used this move right from the start, everyone would definitely look down on him, thinking that he was too reckless. However, Ling Han had already displayed his powerful strength in his previous battle with Gu Daoyi. Thus, though this move was extremely reckless, everyone only sighed in admiration at his wisdom. A simple-minded person who only knew how to fight to the death. How could he be called a king tier? A brute was more like it. I really didn't think that it would end like this. Why do I feel like this is a bit familiar? That large black dog. Ling Han's style is really a bit similar to that large black dog's. Those who have been provoked by him must be incredibly depressed. After a while, loud laughter came from below. Thinking about it carefully, this was indeed very funny. Gu Daoyi accumulated his strength step by step, and was about to unleash his most powerful move, yet he was instantly tricked. The contrast was so great that everyone couldn't help but laugh. Gu Daoyi fell to the bottom of the valley, kicking up a cloud of dust. There were special regulations in the sunken abyss valley, and even heavenly body tier elites couldn't fly. He immediately crawled to his feet, and released a furious roar that was filled with violence and killing intent. This fall was definitely the greatest humiliation he had ever experienced in his life. Let alone a mere 3,000 feet, he had only fallen for a dozen or so breaths of time. But as he fell, he could clearly feel the mocking expressions on the faces of the people on every level. This caused his face to flush red, and he almost exploded. This was a great humiliation that he had never experienced before. It was almost comparable to when he had been expelled from the celestial realm. "I will kill you," he said word by word, his black hair soaring into the sky. His fury was burning to the point of madness. He took out another floating rock and killed his way up. His speed was astonishing because all the experts were definitely at the upper levels, and there was no one below who could stop him. Even if they formed a team, it would be useless. In front of such a peak-level king, what could a mere 12 people do? On the other hand, Ling Han's speed of ascension was much slower, because his opponents were all the strongest experts in the world. It would be difficult for him to win, and even if he could win, it would take a very long time. Because there were too few people at the top, it was extremely difficult to ascend even a single step. Moreover, peak-level kings weren't willing to rashly start a battle, so everyone was waiting for the people below to ascend. That way, they would naturally have a stepping stone. The battle between them had to be saved for the moment they reached the top of the golden boulder. Otherwise, there was no need to fight now. As long as they maintained the same height, they would naturally be able to obtain the same blessings of heaven and earth. There was no need to fight to the death. Ling Han, Gu Daoi's speed was extremely fast, and he had charged all the way up from below. Now that the stairs had been formed, he would be able to rise by a few meters with each move he made, so how long would it take for him to travel a distance of 3,000 meters? He was already beyond furious, and he drew out a divine sword. This was the sword that he had forged in his first life in the immortal realm, and it was a genuine saint tool. Moreover, it was a level 20 saint tool, the strongest in the immortal realm. The sword slashed over. However, a brick silently appeared, blocking the blade of the sword. Empress Luanxing moved, holding a brick in her hand, her fighting spirit boiling. This sword strike actually came to a sudden stop. What? Seeing this scene, the people below were all in an uproar. That was Gu Daoi's attack filled with hatred, yet it had actually been forcefully blocked. This meant that the person who had attacked was no weaker than Gu Daoi. And who was it? How could he be so ferocious? They looked towards Empress Luanxing. Although there was a layer of cloth separating them, everyone could feel her alluring charm. This was an exquisite beauty that didn't need to reveal her true appearance to be able to enchant everyone. You dare to stop me? Gu Daoi said harshly. His whole body was exuding a domineering and killing intent. At this moment he would kill anyone who dared to stop him. I can't stop you? Empress Luanxing smirked coldly. Impudent. And who do you think you are? Gu Daoi was startled. He really hadn't thought that this woman would actually be even more arrogant and domineering than him. She was merely a woman, so how could she possibly have such breadth of mind? He really was starting to like this woman a little. However, she had also cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art, so her physical body was destined to be devoured by him. He couldn't possibly take it for himself. Thus, in his eyes, no matter how beautiful she was, or how enchanting her charm was, she was only a tool to increase his strength. How could he possibly like a tool? Die! He tapped out with a finger. This was the blood god finger. Empress Luanxing waved her hand, parrying the attack with a brick. The finger tapped out, yet nothing happened. The might of this finger was completely absorbed by the brick. Absolute beginning stone, a derivative of the chaos source rock. It was a source rock that was born at the beginning of the heaven and earth, and could absorb all attacks below the Genesis tier. Although its might was also limited now, it still possessed great, unpredictable might. At least the might of the blood god finger was not enough. Perhaps he would have to channel the mystical power of his 10th life, and combine all the secret techniques of his 9 lives to break through the limits of the absolute beginning stone. The problem was that he could not directly channel the mystical power of his 10th life. He had to channel his 9th life first before he could blast out the supreme secret technique of his 10th life. You don't have the right to block my husband's path to the heavens, Empress Luanxing said proudly. She looked down from above, pointing at Gu Daoi like an empress rebuking a disrespectful subject. For the sake of Ling Han, she would block any elites that posed a threat. The empress' gentleness bloomed only for one person. Gu Daoi's expression was livid. He didn't think that Empress Luanxing could stop him, but a woman whose strength was almost on par with his was actually willing to go to such lengths for a man. This made him jealous. Stop me, you're seeking death, he said menacingly. Dream on. Empress Luanxing said coldly. Right now, their cultivation levels were the same, and after the restrictions were lifted, their cultivation levels were also the same. Thus, she definitely had to battle Gu Daoi. Both of them had cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art, and it was destined that one of them would benefit the other. Thus, she definitely had to win. This was an unavoidable battle to the death. Gu Daoyi didn't reply, but flames of fury blazed in his heart. Only one person could survive between him and Empress Luanxing, but this was clearly not a good place for a battle to the death. As long as the floating rock shattered, he would naturally leave the battle. Moreover, his target was the golden floating rock at the top. There should be a great opportunity for him there. Damn it. His fighting spirit was boiling, and he decided to defeat Empress Luanxing as soon as possible so that he could catch up to Ling Han and be the first to reach the top of the golden floating rock. Mystical power of the first life. Mystical power of the second life. Mystical power of the 10th life. Gu Daoyi attacked with his full strength. After accumulating power for a while, he used the body of his 10 lives again. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 1458. Gu Daoyi and Empress Luanxing battled fiercely. The two of them were at the same cultivation level, and there was almost no difference in their true cultivation level. Moreover, they both cultivated the 9 Deaths Heaven art, so they could be considered powerful opponents. Even if Gu Daoyi had formed a divine fetus and could summon his 9 bodies to help him, Empress Luanxing had a brick in her hand. This was the absolute beginning stone, and it could absorb all power. Its upper limit was as high as the Genesis tier. Even if its effect was weakened here, it was still very domineering, enough to allow the Empress to fight against Gu Daoyi. If he fought the invincible Empress, Gu Daoyi couldn't obtain the floating stone. If he couldn't obtain the floating stone, he couldn't ascend anymore. This made him extremely angry, and he continued to growl. However, Empress Luanxing was above him, completely suppressing him. There was nothing he could do. Ling Han relaxed. He looked up, and the Supreme King tiers were all making adjustments, waiting for the final attack. Now was not the time to make a move. Ling Han shook his head in his mind. Even if he snatched the floating stones of these king tiers, it wouldn't be enough for him to ascend to the same level as the golden floating stone. He had to wait for more people to ascend and provide them with stepping stones. Soon, a complete echelon had formed below. The powerful people could kill their way up, and there was no need to wait at all. More and more people entered the second stage, from a few dozen to 100, and then to several hundred, thousands, tens of thousands. This time, it was 100 flowers blooming, and the number of prodigy king tiers was far greater than any other time. Thus, more and more people entered the second stage, causing intense battles. Ling Han, Zi Chenfeng, Long Xiangyue, and the others all moved, continuing to ascend. Who after ascending a few dozen feet, a strong wind suddenly blew in the sky. Even Ling Han and the others felt as if they were floating under their feet, as if they were about to be carried by the wind. However, if they left the floating stone, they would fall to the bottom of the valley, which was equivalent to starting all over again. They hurriedly channeled their origin power to resist this kind of wind, but even so, their feet were still unstable, and they struggled to maintain their figures. Some people had just reached this height, but when the wind blew, they directly screamed and fell into the valley. Currently, there were only a dozen or so people who could remain at this height, but they were still 100 feet away from the golden boulder at the top. This seemed very close, but based on the assumption that a single floating rock could only rise by 6 feet, forming a flight of stairs for a single person to reach the top would require 32 floating rocks, which meant 32 kings who could stabilize the area. It's too hard. It was no wonder that no one had been able to reach the top of the golden hovering rock for so many years. There were simply too few top-tier monarchs, and there were simply no opponents who could help him ascend in this final stage. However, it wasn't like there was no chance for more than a dozen people, because those who had been defeated could fight their way up again. As long as the difference in numbers wasn't too great, they could still continue to push themselves higher. Now, they could no longer count on weaklings to be their stepping stones. Experts had to fight, and even peak-level kings had to become the stepping stones of other kings. Otherwise, no one would be able to reach the peak. Kill. Of course, all peak-level kings had their own pride. If they could ascend to the top, they definitely wouldn't want to be on the same level as others. After a short pause, a chaotic battle immediately unfolded. Ling Han didn't hold back either. His hands flew through the air as he continuously unleashed the lightning sword technique. Streaks of sword light surged out of his body. His understanding of the way of the sword had reached another breakthrough. I am the sword, so why should I be restricted to the form? Every single movement of his was a sword, and even his hair could emit sword chi. Furthermore, the lightning sword technique had also fused with the tide of the ages. As the fusion between the two deepened, his battle prowess also became stronger. My power can only surpass 6 stars, but how many stars can my battle prowess surpass? Ling Han didn't even know himself. This was because his opponents were also peak-level kings who could surpass several stars in battle. He didn't have an accurate number, so he couldn't accurately estimate his own battle prowess. However, that didn't matter. He didn't want numbers, he wanted invincibility. Fight, fight, fight. He let out a long roar as he charged into the crowd like a demon king, provoking everyone. Everyone else was fighting one-on-one, but he didn't care. He attacked everyone he saw, acting as if he was going to become public enemy number 1. This did indeed attract enough aggro for him. Soon, 4 pairs of monarchs who were fighting each other stopped and started to attack him. There were a whole 8 peak-level king tiers. One god tool after another unleashed their might. Some were even at the Eternal River tier, and some were even at the level of pseudo-saint tools. They were only suppressed by the environment here, but their might still surpassed the high extreme of the heavenly body tier. They definitely couldn't be blocked by those at the early stage of the low extreme. Moreover, there were a total of 8 such king tiers. Ling Han was unafraid. Since he dared to provoke them, he had a certain level of confidence. He used the star-plucking step, and moved like a ghost on the floating rock beneath his feet. He finally drew out the divine demon sword, and heaven and earth paled as he slashed out. Although the way of the sword didn't need to be restricted by the situation, as long as there was a sword in his heart, everything could be a sword. This didn't mean that the might of any sword would be the same. In terms of intrinsic quality, the divine demon sword was actually more powerful than Ling Han. Its level was far superior. Celestial light radiated, and divine might was invincible. What made these king tiers even more depressed was that Ling Han specialized in attacking the floating rocks beneath their feet. At least in the immortal realm, the divine demon sword's ability to pierce through defense was definitely the strongest. Their origin power shields were completely useless, and if they were directly struck by the divine demon sword, they would definitely shatter. They all roared in anger as they fell from the sky. However, their expressions were all extremely solemn. If they were to battle against Ling Han, they definitely couldn't get close to him. Otherwise, nothing would be able to block that sword's attack. It was a floating rock now, but it could possibly be their body in the future. This was far too sharp and domineering. Could it be that it was a saint tool that had reached great accomplishment? Otherwise, how could it possess such terrifying might? Ling Han continued to rise. 6 meters, 12 meters, 6 meters. However, when he was still 12 meters away, he stopped again. There were no more opponents around him. If there was no one who could charge up, he could only sit here and do nothing. Even if he obtained first place, he still wouldn't be able to ascend that golden floating rock. Thus, although there had been many outstanding prodigies in the past, there hadn't been enough powerful competitors. They could only look down on all the others, and it was lonely at the top. Ling Han was filled with anticipation. Would rank 3 king tiers like second in the world, Zichen Feng, and Long Xiangyue be able to charge up and lend him a hand? Get down. Long Xiangyue was the first to arrive. She wielded a divine sword, and the armor on her body transformed into a coiled true dragon that exuded a terrifying dragon's might. This was an immense pressure even for rank 3 king tiers, and it was also an important reason why she was the second to arrive. Her fine black hair fluttered in the wind, and her skin was as translucent as jade. It was actually glowing, making her look like a goddess. No, a goddess of war. Her sword slashed down, stunning the heavens. Her target was actually also the floating rock beneath Ling Han's feet. Who said that king tiers had to fight with dignity? Chapter 1460. Ling Han chuckled and heaven's might was unleashed. The expressions of the three king tiers instantly changed, and expressions of astonishment appeared on their faces. Their power had suddenly dropped by 2 stars. It wasn't that they didn't have a way to defend themselves, but they were completely unprepared for this attack, so they had no time to react. What was even more despicable was that Ling Han had only unleashed this attack after they had unleashed their attacks. If this had been the case from the very beginning, then their attacks would naturally have been weakened by about 100 times. But now they had unleashed their most powerful attacks, yet their defenses had dropped by 100 times after unleashing this attack. This was equivalent to the combined attack of 4 king tiers, yet apart from Ling Han, everyone else's power had dropped by 100 times. How were they supposed to fight this? Without any suspense, the 3 king tiers were all sent flying off their floating rocks. This wasn't enough to severely wound them. Normally, they would only suffer a small loss, but it was different now. Once they left their floating rocks, they could only fall down. Ling Han instantly obtained 3 floating rocks. He was about to ascend to the summit. The floating rock beneath his feet absorbed the other rocks, and its size increased. It was also rising up, and it was almost as tall as the large golden floating rock. The people below all wore expressions of disbelief. Who would have thought that the one to ascend to the summit would be Ling Han? He wasn't a rank 3 king tier. Ling Han! Gu Daoyi roared in fury. He had been completely entangled by Empress Luanxing and didn't even have a chance to ascend to the summit. This infuriated him, and he said, "If you dare take another step, I'll kill you. You make it sound like I'm afraid of you." Ling Han sneered. He raised his leg and unhesitatingly stepped toward the golden floating rock. The golden floating rock radiated with golden light, and Ling Han's body was also covered in golden light. He was like a god of war, standing in the air and crushing all beings. This scene caused everyone's hearts to tremble. This is Grandpa Dog's good fortune. The large black dog had charged over at some point in time. He was only 6 meters away from Ling Han, but there was no floating rock for him to continue ascending. However, he still leaped up with all his might, biting towards Ling Han's ankle. Its speed was extraordinarily fast, but this place had its own regulations. When it was about to pounce at Ling Han's feet, an invisible force appeared. Like a net, it quickly restrained its figure. "Oh bite! Oh bite!" The large black dog continued to open his mouth. Strangely, it seemed as if he had forcefully bitten a hole in the net, and the dog's head actually poked out. Pa! He bit down on Ling Han's ankle. Ling Han gritted his teeth. His physique was astonishingly strong, yet the large black dog's teeth were like celestial weapons, causing him great pain. "Stupid dog, let go of me, let go of me." Ling Han hurriedly swung his leg. "I won't let go. I won't let go even if I die." This is Grandpa Dog's fated opportunity. The large black dog bit down firmly, but he was still able to speak at the same time. This was truly admirable. Below them, Long Xiangyue was the first to charge over. Ling Han sighed, and could only try his best to pull his leg out, wanting to drag the large black dog up as well. However, there were restrictions here. The large black dog had only bitten out a head-sized hole, so it was extremely difficult for him to drag the rest of his body over. It was as if Ling Han was struggling in a tug-of-war, and he dragged the large black dog up inch by inch. "Little Han, did you not eat your fill? Hurry up, hurry up. That fierce woman is about to reach us." The large black dog was still urging him on. "Stupid dog, let go of me." Ling Han shouted. "I won't let go even if I die." The large black dog shook his head repeatedly. At this moment, Long Xiangyue had already caught up. Her strength was far too powerful, and she had practically crushed everything in her path. Only after entering the last 30 meters did her speed slow down. There was nothing she could do about it, as there were far too few king tiers that could reach this place. Even so, she still closed in. When she was only 6 meters away from the large black dog, her sword slashed out, slashing at the large black dog. "Motherfucker!" The large black dog howled in agony. However, the astonishing thing was that his defenses were actually not inferior to Ling Han's. This sword strike only caused sparks to fly, and he was actually completely unscathed. "It hurts," he howled in agony. His wretched appearance was unbearable. The people below all sucked in their teeth. "You didn't even fucking injure a single hair, so what the hell are you screaming for?" They had seen scoundrels before, but this was the first time they had seen such a scoundrel. Long Xiangyue was also dumbfounded. Although this sword strike hadn't been unleashed with her full strength, it shouldn't have been unable to even slice off a strand of dog hair. This despicable dog was extremely extraordinary. Ling Han was initially startled, but then he recalled that the large black dog had come from the celestial realm. Moreover, it had hatched from a celestial egg that he had obtained from an ancient site. Moreover, it had cultivated in hibernation for who knew how many tens of thousands of years, so it was reasonable that it possessed some special abilities. Long Xiangyue slashed a few more times, and the large black dog naturally continued to howl in agony. However, not a single strike was able to cause any substantial damage to him. This despicable dog was simply making a fuss out of nothing. "Brat, hurry up and lift Grandpa Dog up. Otherwise, Grandpa Dog's butt is going to be sliced in two." The large black dog yelled. "Nonsense. Whose butt isn't sliced in two?" Ling Han said with a smile. "Oh, Grandpa Dog has been injured, so I spoke without thinking. Brat, hurry up and pull me up. Haven't you eaten your fill?" The large black dog urged again. Ling Han wanted to kick this despicable dog's face, but it refused to let go. Ling Han could only use all his strength to lift it up first, and then send it flying with a kick. As he pulled with all his might, the large black dog began to slowly rise upwards. When half of its body was about to reach over, Long Xiangyue suddenly leaped over, grabbing onto the large black dog's tail. She was clearly trying to hitch a ride with the large black dog. Shwa, the floating rock beneath her feet fell down, and she was completely relying on the large black dog to hang in the air. "I'm going over. This is fine too." The people below were all laughing so hard that their lips twitched. They felt that this year's battle was so hilarious. 3 people had become candied haws. Could it be any more hilarious? "Damn woman, hurry up and let go. Grandpa Dog's tail is about to be torn off by you." The large black dog barked. How could Long Xiangyue care about him? She continued to grab onto his tail, refusing to let go. "There's gold on Grandpa Dog's tail. Not just anyone can touch it." The large black dog barked again. Long Xiangyue's silence was golden. At this moment, Zi Chenfeng, second in the world, Hong Ma, and the others also charged over. They didn't say anything, and they also grabbed onto the large black dog's tail. Since this was the case, they had to ascend the floating golden rock no matter what and get a share of the loot. Fuck. The people below didn't know what to say. A few young king tears were hanging from a single dog's tail. No matter how they thought about it, this scene was hilarious. Are these really top-tier king tears? Even more people charged over. Aside from Empress Luanxing, who was still battling Gu Daoyi to the death, the top-tier king tears all wanted to bask in the limelight and get a share of the loot. Some people were unable to resist the gale of the last 30 meters, but there were still some people who successfully charged over, all of them grabbing onto the large black dog's tail. This large black dog's tail was only less than 2 feet long, so how could there be so many places for people to grab onto? Very soon, a large number of people were grabbing onto his tail. The people behind him turned their attention to its 2 hind legs, and they also grabbed onto a skewer of candied haws. Was even more refreshing. Chapter 1461. Upon seeing this, Ling Han didn't know what to say. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Damn dog, hurry up and let go. I'll give you a share of the benefits, all right?" Ling Han said. "Don't let go," the king tiers below all said in unison. They didn't know what benefits they would obtain if they reached the peak of the golden boulder, but none of them wanted to miss out on it. "Let go. Don't let go." Both sides were yelling loudly. Just a while ago, the large black dog had been a rat that everyone hated, and they wanted to kick every time they saw him. Now, however, he had become everyone's savior, and none of them had any enmity towards him. The people below were all amused. Strange things happened every year, but compared to this year, they were on a completely different level. Have you ever seen a large group of king tears holding onto a dog's leg or tail? Just a while ago, it had been a candied haw, but now, it was like a hornet's nest. Joy, this was too much joy. However, even though the king tears knew that they were being laughed at, none of them were willing to let go. If they let go, they would definitely miss out on the opportunity to obtain the rare opportunity. They all firmly believed that this golden boulder hadn't appeared here for no reason. Reaching the peak would result in a rare opportunity that could only be encountered once in a lifetime. Everyone used all their strength to hold onto the large black dog, refusing to let go. Motherfucker. The large black dog howled in pain. His physique had actually far surpassed his cultivation level, but it wasn't like Ling Han's, which would increase along with his cultivation level. In the past, he had once cultivated to an extremely high cultivation level, but in order to maintain his vitality, he had fallen into a deep slumber. His cultivation level had also fallen, but his physique hadn't. Thus, before his cultivation level recovered, his physique couldn't advance in the slightest. However, at the same time, his physique was incredibly powerful. However, he was being held down by so many king tears, and the regulations here were extremely special. A single king tear was equivalent to a mountain, and his tail and claws were like 20 mountains. How could he endure this? It hurt. The large black dog's face was twisted, and tears began to flow. He bared his teeth, and his tongue spun around in his mouth. Ling Han earnestly advised, "Little Black, let go. Be good." As he spoke, he tried to hold back his laughter. It was rare for this lowly dog to be at a disadvantage. It made him feel very happy. "Don't let go." The people below shouted in unison. In fact, Ling Han couldn't drag so many people. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be a problem, but there were rules here. With so many people hanging below, even he could barely hold on and not be dragged down. He decided that he might as well stop moving. Instead, he began to tell jokes to the large black dog. As long as he relaxed his mouth, all of his problems would naturally be solved. In fact, it wasn't that there weren't any smart people who wanted to use the floating rocks to ascend. However, the problem was that as Ling Han ascended to the peak, the sky above the last step was also sealed. Apart from the hole that had been bitten out by the large black dog, there was no other way to ascend. Thus, keeping the large black dog hanging was the only way. The large black dog's face was flushed red. Firstly, it was because of pain. Many of the fur on his tail had been torn off, and he was almost bald. Secondly, it was because he was being teased by Ling Han. He closed his ears and refused to listen, but Ling Han used his divine sense to send a voice transmission directly into his mind, so he had no choice but to listen. Moreover, his humor threshold was especially low, and he would laugh the moment he was teased. Thus, he was suffering. As he bit down hard on Ling Han, his lips were curled up. He was smiling, but tears were streaming down his face. This was because he was in pain, and it appeared incredibly strange. A competition between king tears had now become a farce. Even the great elite of the Star San Martial Arts Academy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know what expression he should have. This was unprecedented. This time, someone had finally ascended to the peak, and it was destined to start a golden age of martial art. However, the scene before him, Shua, at this moment, another king tier charged up. However, he was sent flying by a strong gust of wind the moment he arrived. However, his floating rock caused a great change. It allowed another king tier to obtain a chance to ascend a level. Then, after he ascended, he was defeated by another king tier who had been waiting bitterly, and sent that person up a level. Then, another king tier obtained a chance, and ascended again. This was equivalent to allowing all those above to advance a step, but the price was that all those below would fall. Finally, another person reached the height of the last 6 meters. He leaped with all his might and grabbed at the large black dog. "Don't come again," the large black dog wailed. There was no place on his legs or tail that he could grab, so why did he still come? That person dashed out, and his eyes darted around. He caught a small object. Although it was small, he could still grab it. Without hesitation, he grabbed it and held it tightly. Oh! The large black dog's expression instantly changed, and his expression was so complicated that it couldn't be described with words. Everyone was dumbfounded. That was because in his panic, that person actually grabbed the object between the large black dog's legs. There was a mountain hanging from a dog's penis. What kind of concept was that? Even with the astonishing physique of the large black dog, he still hadn't cultivated that part to the peak. My entire family, the large black dog cried, and finally couldn't help but let go. Boom, instantly, everyone fell down with him, and it was a spectacular scene. Zi Chenfeng, Long Xiangyue, second in the world, all the king tears, fuck. Ha. The people below all laughed loudly, unable to hold it in any longer. Ling Han's foot finally landed, and completely stepped onto the floating golden rock. A streak of golden light instantly enshrouded him, and his body instantly disappeared. Meanwhile, sweet dew descended from heaven and earth, nourishing everyone in the second stage. However, none of the king tears who had fallen with the large black dog were fated to receive it. The battle had ended, and even Empress Luan Xing and Gu Daoi, who were still fighting, were forced to stop. They were no match for the power of regulations in this valley, and now was the time to absorb the fortune of heaven and earth, so they couldn't cause trouble. Those who had advanced to the second stage all sat down in a cross-legged position, activating their cultivation techniques to absorb as much as possible. As for those in the valley, they could only helplessly leave. The large black dog had gone berserk, and he started to bite everyone. If it weren't for these people grabbing onto him, he would definitely have already been dragged onto the floating golden rock by Ling Han. Moreover, there was someone who dared to grab onto his whip. Grandpa Dog will bite you all to death. He became a rabid dog and he started to bite everyone. In the beginning, the king tears still gave in to him. After all, they were in the wrong. However, the large black dog was relentless, and he continued to bite, finally enraging the king tears. Fuck, they hadn't obtained anything, and they were extremely displeased. One by one, the king tears began to retaliate. When there were more than 10 king tears, even the large black dog couldn't hold on any longer, and he could only turn around and flee. He once again became a street rat, and everyone wanted to kill him. Woof woof woof. Grandpa Dog will return, the large black dog said before transforming into a streak of black light, fleeing out of the sunken abyss valley. The king tears all stopped in their tracks. The large black dog was extremely slippery, and they couldn't catch up to him at all. They all looked up into the sky, where boundless divine light radiated from the floating golden rock. It was dazzling and dazzling. What kind of fortune had Ling Han obtained? Chapter 1462. Ling Han also wanted to know. The golden stone glowed, and Ling Han discovered that the stone beneath his feet had melted. It was as if it had become water, and he had sunk into it. During this process, Ling Han had considered entering the Black Tower. After all, the outcome was unpredictable. Although the sunken abyss valley had always been synonymous with great fortune, one could never be too careful. When Ling Han had entered an ancient site in the past, it had always been a great fortune. However, when he entered, the great fortune would always be accompanied by calamity. For example, an Azura demon emperor had appeared in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm, Demon Master Jin Yi in the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, and he had almost been screwed over by Notionless Saint in the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Thus, he didn't dare to be careless this time. No one had ever reached the final step before, so he had to be on his guard. Fortunately, he only continued to sink, and he didn't feel any danger. When his head was submerged, he appeared in a strange place. This place was filled with stars, but it wasn't real. He could touch them, but they were also far away. He stood in the air, but it was as if he had landed on solid ground. He didn't feel empty. The interior of this golden stone was actually a separate space. Ling Han walked, but it was the same no matter how he walked. His surroundings were all the same, except for the void and the stars. Where was the great fortune? Hey! Ling Han said. Is anyone there? When he shouted those words, Even he wanted to laugh. However, at this moment, someone actually replied, yes. Ling Han's heart trembled and he asked in a low voice, "Who is it?" "A person who died many years ago," the voice replied. Ling Han didn't believe this. There were many people who had died many years ago, and they had risen again. He asked, "How should I address you, senior?" The voice paused for a moment before continuing, "My name is Yu. I should be a wandering ghost from billions of years ago." "Then why did senior summon me here?" Ling Han asked. "To give you a great fortune," Yu replied. Ling Han was unmoved and said indifferently, "May I ask what kind of opportunity it is?" "Kid, do you know that there's an even higher world above the God realm?" Yu countered. Ling Han's heart stirred, feeling a little surprised. Could it be that this lonely ghost also came from the celestial realm? This was extremely possible, because even the great sage Duangxingshe was unable to do anything to this place. This was enough to prove that this person had to at least have the strength of a Saint King. Above the Saint King tier was the severing mundane tier, and only the celestial realm could give birth to such elites. "The immortal region," Ling Han said softly. "Oh, you know about the existence of the immortal region? Could it be that you're from an exiled race?" Yu couldn't help but ask. The exiled race, the ancient divine race, was an exiled race. The Faceless clan and the Nine Serpent clan had extremely powerful bloodlines. Moreover, it was extremely likely that Ding Ping and Zhuoyao were also members of the ancient divine tribe. As for Gu Daoi, there was no need to even mention him. In truth, he was an ancestor-level figure of the ancient divine tribe, the first generation. But such a powerful race and bloodline had actually been exiled from the celestial realm? Ling Han didn't answer. In truth, he knew very little about the ancient divine tribe, and similarly, he didn't know much about the celestial realm. Of course, it was better to say as little as possible. Saying too much would be completely wrong. Yu didn't suspect anything. "Since you also know about the existence of the celestial realm, then you can save me some time. I can give you the rare treasures of the celestial realm and the techniques of the celestial realm, but in return, you have to kill a few people for me." "Kill who?" Ling Han asked. "Tell me, I don't have the habit of killing innocent people. If there isn't a reason to kill, I'd rather not have any inheritance." In truth, the Black Tower was one of the most powerful rare treasures of the celestial realm. Thus, Ling Han wouldn't be too greedy for the so-called treasures of the celestial realm. He wouldn't forget his own principles and overstep his bottom line. "Ha!" Yu laughed loudly. Very good, very good. I like people with principles. Since that's the case, let me tell you a story." He paused and then began to speak. "I was the last member of the Hu clan. 10 billion years ago, the exact time is no longer known. There was a great upheaval in the celestial realm, and countless forces, including top forces, suffered a calamity of annihilation. They were all exiled from the celestial realm. My Hu clan couldn't be considered a top force in the celestial realm, but it could still be considered a powerful force. We had a severing mundane tier ancestor, and my clan had once obtained a rare treasure. However, we still couldn't discover the use of this treasure even after countless years. In the great upheaval, my Hu clan played it safe and didn't participate in it. However, there was a clan Yu's voice suddenly turned cold, and it was as if he was gritting his teeth. They maliciously slandered me, and slandered my Hu clan for supporting the upheaval. As a result, a supreme elite descended and annihilated my Hu clan. What that clan wanted was precisely the rare treasure that my Hu clan had obtained. They were originally close friends of my Hu clan, yet when we were unprepared, they stabbed us in the back. Because I went out to train, I luckily escaped this calamity. After receiving the news, I returned to the ancestral grounds and took out that precious treasure. Although that clan searched many times, they couldn't find the whereabouts of the rare treasure. However, they were constantly monitoring me, and after discovering that I had appeared, they targeted me and pursued me all the way. I escaped from the celestial realm with the precious treasure, but I was still severely wounded by their pursuit and died. However, a wisp of my remnant soul actually fused with the rare treasure, And only now did I know how to use this precious treasure. Unfortunately, it was already too late. With the support of the precious treasure, a wisp of my remnant soul didn't die, and I lived through one lifetime after another. All of this was to find a supreme prodigy that could one day enter the celestial realm and cleanse the grievances of my Hu clan. As he spoke, his voice became shrill, and it was filled with boundless fury. Thinking about it, it was indeed tragic. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "Based on this sunken abyss valley should actually be the grievous grievance valley." Indeed, Who you said, I could only activate the rare treasure to a limited extent, and change the situation of heaven and earth here to attract generations of prodigies. After waiting for so many years, I've finally found a candidate that I'm satisfied with. I don't need you to kill all of the Hu clan's enemies, either. I just need the culprit to pay the price. Swear to the heavens that you will complete this mission, and I will pass on the ultimate techniques of the Hu clan and this rare treasure to you. If it's really as Senior says, then when I enter the celestial realm in the future and gain enough strength, I will definitely not let you down. Ling Han raised his hand and swore a Dao oath. The higher a cultivator's cultivation, the more they couldn't make Dao oaths carelessly. This was because such an expert could already draw upon the laws of heaven and earth, and it was as if they were being watched by a pair of eyes from the heavens. Alright. Hu Yu laughed, as if he had already seen his enemies vanish in front of him. Chapter 1464. 10 years passed. Humans were very forgetful creatures. Even though what had happened in the sunken abyss valley back then had alarmed a saint, many people had gotten used to it after 10 years, and they no longer paid it any attention. However, those who had advanced to the second stage were all bathed in the divine light of the sun stone, and their physique was enhanced. The most direct manifestation was their physique. There was a layer of light flashing on the surface of everyone's body. It was possible for one to cultivate the legendary extreme sun physique. During battle, one would not only be able to affect one's opponent's vision, but they would also be able to fool one's divine sense. It could be said to be an extremely powerful physique. An acquired physique would not affect one's original bloodline and physique. It could be said that they had cultivated an additional divine ability. For everyone, it was a huge improvement, except for one person. Gu Daoyi. The mystic art he had cultivated in his first life was called Dazzle the World, and it had the same effect as the sun physique. Although combining the two together could increase the power of his mystic art, compared to others who had created a new mystic art from nothing, the difference was huge. He could not say that it was a loss. He could only say that the improvement was too small. Suddenly, the light that shrouded the valley disappeared in an instant, and everyone opened their eyes at the same time. The blessing of heaven and earth was over. I seemed to have grasped an incredible divine ability. Gasp, I actually advanced from the early stage of the medium extreme to the middle stage. Me too. I advanced from the middle stage of the high extreme to the late stage. My physique has improved. It seems like absorbing spiritual energy and sensing the world has become much easier. Everyone cried out in surprise and were filled with pleasant surprise. 10 years of being blessed by the heavens and earth had allowed them to make astonishing progress. Gu Daoyi was a little confused at first. However, his killing intent immediately surged as he charged toward the gigantic golden rock in the sky. He felt that he had suffered a great loss. Firstly, his divine fetus had indeed improved a little, but it wasn't obvious. The addition of the extreme yang physique didn't affect him much. Secondly, he had already reached the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier in the first place, and had already encountered a bottleneck. Unless he broke through to the eternal river tier, it would be very difficult for him to advance any further. If the others were to be reckoned on the scale of 10, he would not have gained more than 1. What was worse was that Ling Han might have gotten 100. His killing intent surged. No matter what benefits Ling Han obtained, he was going to plunder it. This great fortune belonged to him. Boom, he rose into the air. The sunken abyss valley had already returned to normal, so he could naturally fly. A distance of 3,000 feet was nothing to him, and he could cover it in a single leap. He made a move and slapped Jinshi with his palm. At that time, he had seen Ling Han enter the Golden Rock, and he believed that he had not left yet. With a mighty palm strike, and the other party being caught off guard, he should be able to severely injure him, or even kill him. This was because he was no longer at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Instead, he had recovered his normal cultivation level. He was at the peak stage of the pinnacle level, and could even kill those in the low extreme of the eternal river tier. You dare? Empress Luanxing attacked. Stop! The Rain Emperor shouted. How dare you disrespect my master? Ding Ping and Zhuyao attacked. Although Su Ran, the Notionless Saint, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden didn't say anything, they all launched attacks at Gu Daoyi. A bunch of ants, and you think you can stop me? Gu Daoyi smirked coldly. He had now recovered his peak strength, and added with his divine fetus and 10 lives of mystical power, who in the heavenly body tier could stop him. He simply pressed his left hand down to meet everyone's attacks, while his right hand continued to slap at the Golden Rock. He fought against 7 kings alone, his heroic spirit soaring into the sky. Gu Daoyi's palm strike landed on the Golden Rock first, and an earth-shattering boom erupted. The Golden Rock also shattered in response, turning into billions of fragments. In fact, these fragments were so small that they couldn't even be seen with the naked eye. Immediately afterward, the attacks of Empress Luanxing and the others also arrived. However, Gu Daoyi's left hand transformed into a massive black demonic palm, and blocked all of the attacks that came his way. However, he still frowned slightly and raised his hand. There were actually 3 cracks on his palm. One had been struck by Empress Luanxing, one by the Rain Emperor, and the last by the Notionless Saint. He couldn't help but be astonished. There were actually 3 people that could injure him? They were too small. However, the others in the valley were even more astonished. 7 king tiers had attacked, and among them were the king tier assassin and the fist demon, the 2 supreme king tiers. Yet, their attacks had only caused Gu Daoyi's palm to bleed slightly. Gu Daoyi was truly powerful, and he was worthy of the title of the greatest prodigy of all time. However, many people looked toward the location where the Golden Rock had originally been. There stood a proud and lofty figure. Ling Han. Could Gu Daoyi shatter the Sunstone? The answer was obviously no. To say nothing of the fact that he was only at the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier, even if he recovered to his peak condition, he still couldn't shatter it. Otherwise, the Hu clan wouldn't have obtained the 9 heavens flame tens of billions of years ago. The reason why this sunstone had become so brittle was because its essence had already completely dissipated. It was just a piece of rock, so it was naturally extremely fragile, and would shatter with a single strike. Ling Han closed his eyes. His mind was still filled with a vast amount of information, and he didn't immediately come back to his senses. The 9 heavens flame had already been planted, and had become his life force. Although it was still a young flame now, it would increase along with his strength. At that time, even celestial kings would be moved. Quang. There was a clap of thunder in the clear sky, and dark clouds surged. Blazing white lightning interweaved in the clouds. Those dense black clouds, those bolts of lightning that were several thousand meters thick, all caused one's heart to palpitate. Was this the end of the world? How could it be so terrifying? Everyone shook their heads. Although there were many people in the valley who had increased their cultivation level, none of them had advanced a minor level. This was a threshold that could only be broken through with one's comprehension. Thus, this wasn't their heavenly tribulation. They were all very curious. Who was going to undergo a heavenly tribulation? This was too terrifying, wasn't it? Gu Daoyi still wanted to make a move, yet he forcibly stopped himself. He had discovered that this was Ling Han's heavenly tribulation. This heavenly tribulation was too terrifying, and even his heart palpitated. If he interfered, it was very possible that he would die. He was extremely shocked. How could there possibly be such a terrifying heavenly tribulation? Yet Ling Han wasn't surprised at all. That was because he was presently already at the peak stage of the pinnacle level. This was a double heavenly tribulation, so its might was naturally far greater than normal. Why didn't it come one layer at a time? Within the sunstone, the senses of heaven and earth were blocked. Ordinary stones naturally couldn't do this, but this was a celestial stone, and its level was far above anything in the immortal realm. Thus, it wasn't impossible for it to conceal the secrets of heaven. Kwang, the heavenly tribulation rapidly took form. A bolt of lightning that was 300 meters thick and 30,000 meters long struck down, directly attacking the top of Ling Han's head. Double heavenly tribulation, this wasn't a 1+1 relationship, but rather a 10-fold increase. How everyone could clearly see that in a mere instant, Ling Han's body was smashed into smithereens. He died just like that? Although the heavenly tribulation was indeed very strong, to die in an instant without even a struggle, that was too weak, right? Meanwhile, Gu Daoi's expression became even more grave. He was a divine fetus, so he could sense that Ling Han hadn't died even in the midst of heavenly tribulation. His aura was still present. The other party had voluntarily destroyed his body to be tempered by the heavenly tribulation. This monster. Chapter 1465. Just as Gu Daoi had thought, it wasn't that Ling Han couldn't resist the heavenly tribulation, but rather that he voluntarily shattered his physical body and tempered it in the heavenly tribulation, pushing his physique to a stronger level. This time, he was slightly strained. After all, it was a double heavenly tribulation. When others faced normal heavenly tribulation, they would either be dead or alive. 7 or 8 out of 10 people would die. However, Ling Han was going to face a double heavenly tribulation. The might of his heavenly tribulation was 10 times stronger than that of the peak stage of the pinnacle level. Gu Daoi really wanted to make a move, but at this time, even Ling Han's body had shattered. If he made a move to kill, then the only thing that awaited Ling Han was death. But the problem was that this kind of heavenly tribulation was very dangerous even for him, and it was very possible that he would also die. Killing an ant, but risking his own death. He shook his head. It wasn't worth it. He was confident that after Ling Han passed the heavenly tribulation, he would still be able to kill him like cutting grass. Because he was Gu Daoi, the divine fetus cultivated by burying 9 lives, and was destined to be invincible. He turned his eyes to Empress Luanxing. This was another person who cultivated the 9 deaths heaven art. If he could refine her fruit of Tao, his divine fetus would definitely advance further, and even the true sons and daughters of those great sects of the celestial realm would be inferior. Empress Luanxing humphed coldly and charged over. Daring to attack her beloved, even without the 9 deaths heaven art, she would still turn Gu Daoi's bones to dust and kill him 100 times. Seeking death. Gu Daoi also humphed coldly. In his peak condition, who could match him in the same cultivation level? He charged towards Empress Luanxing, and the two of them once again engaged in a fierce battle. This time, it was even more dangerous. They had both recovered their strength. They were at the peak stage of the pinnacle level, and their strength was comparable to the low extreme of the eternal river tier, and added with their freakish talent, they could even kill those in the early stage of the low extreme, or even the middle stage. In this kind of battle, the majority of people didn't even have the right to spectate, and had no choice but to retreat far away. Otherwise, if the shockwaves swept over, they would be severely wounded even if they didn't die. The Rain Emperor and the others didn't participate in the battle. They were disdainful to join forces to fight an opponent of the same cultivation level. It didn't take long for more kings to arrive. Long Xiangyue, second under heaven, Hong Ma, and the others had all failed back then. Now that they had received the news, they naturally had to come. At the very least, they had to find out what kind of fortuitous encounters they had obtained. The large black dog had also arrived. He was standing on his hind legs, but his current appearance was truly astonishing. This was because he was actually wearing a pair of iron underpants on his butt. It was obvious that the capture of his little penis had left a deep psychological trauma. Now that he had the protection of the invincible iron underpants, his little penis should be safe. It put its 2 front paws behind its back and walked like a dog. Coupled with a pair of iron underwear, it looked very funny. Many people in the valley had been cultivating in seclusion for the past 10 years, And this was the first time they had seen the large black dog behaving like this. They couldn't help but burst into laughter. This was far too hilarious. Who's laughing? Who's laughing? Come out here right now. The large black dog immediately became hostile, extending a paw and pointing in the direction where the laughter had come from. Haha. However, this caused even more and even louder laughter. Some people were laughing so hard that they couldn't even straighten their backs, while others were even crying. They felt that this large black dog was too shameless. Woof, Grandpa Dog is going to bite your butts into 3 pieces. The large black dog flew into a rage and charged over. The scene instantly became chaotic. Ling Han was undergoing heavenly tribulation, Empress Luanxing was engaged in a fierce battle with Gu Daoyi, and the large black dog had transformed into a rabid dog, biting anyone he saw. It was a complete mess. Ling Han had destroyed his own body and godly bones to temper himself in the heavenly tribulation. However, he had really gone too far this time. Each heavenly tribulation was more powerful than the last, and it was clear that it was trying to kill him. Heaven and earth couldn't be deceived. Ling Han had advanced 2 minor levels in succession before coming out to undergo heavenly tribulation. This was deceiving heaven and earth, so he naturally had to receive the punishment of heaven and earth. The heavenly tribulation was becoming more and more powerful, and it had already lasted for more than half a day. In fact, it didn't stop even after a day had passed, and was still continuing. Ling Han felt that something was wrong. At the beginning, he was only slightly strained, but he was still able to deal with it. However, each heavenly tribulation was stronger than the last. If it had lasted for half a day, then so be it. If it had lasted for a day, then he would have tolerated it. After all, it had come twice at the same time. However, a day hadn't ended, and its power was still increasing. What did this mean? He channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, condensed his true body, and began to resist the heavenly tribulation with all his strength. There was no need to continue tempering, because his physique had already reached the height of level 13 godly metal. This was the limit of his current cultivation level, and added with the fact that the heavenly tribulation was becoming more and more terrifying, he had to face it in his peak condition. The surrounding people were all stunned. Who had ever seen a heavenly tribulation that lasted for such a long time? A heavenly tribulation that lasted for half a day was enough to make the majority of those undergoing heavenly tribulations suffer grievances. A day was completely unimaginable, but Ling Han's heavenly tribulation had exceeded a day. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, who would have believed it? This is a sure-death situation. But if he can survive the heavenly tribulation, then this boy's future will be limitless. Some old antiques made an evaluation. He had angered the heavens, and was able to descend the strongest lightning punishment, but he was still able to stubbornly endure it. This represented an incredible luck. Luck was something that could not be touched or seen, but it was something that no one could ignore. In fact, its importance was above everything else. That was because if you were extremely lucky, directly becoming a celestial with a single alchemy, how many king-tier prodigies would be left behind? Yet it was becoming more and more difficult for Ling Han. The might of the heavenly tribulation had long since surpassed the early stage of the low extreme of the eternal river tier. He reached the medium extreme in half a day, and after a day he reached the high extreme. Now, it was advancing towards the late stage of the high extreme. Theoretically speaking, this was a great tribulation that could easily kill even the peak stage of the heavenly body tier. How could Ling Han not find it difficult? He resisted with all his might, unleashing one ultimate move after another. The move he used the most was naturally the Tide of the Ages. This could disintegrate attacks, and though it was not very effective against the heavenly tribulation, every bit of it could be disintegrated was still a little. Meanwhile, Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll with all his might, using this cultivation technique that could possibly be called the strongest in the celestial realm to protect himself. The indestructible heaven scroll had never been too powerful in terms of offense, but in terms of defense, at least at present, there was not a single cultivation technique that could surpass it. Ling Han was blasted into a spray of blood, and even his level 13 godly bones were on the verge of collapse. However, there was a golden light enshrouding his whole body, allowing him to rapidly recover from his injuries. Indestructible and undying, this caused everyone to be completely speechless. Previously, everyone knew that Ling Han's physique was very strong, very awesome, but exactly how strong was it, they were not clear. And at this moment, everyone had a direct understanding. Another half a day later, the might of the heavenly tribulation advanced into the peak stage of the low extreme of the eternal river tier. This caused even Ling Han to explode in anger. When the strike landed, his blood splattered into the air, and his godly bones would be shattered in a few blows. His situation was extremely precarious. Could this be the end? Chapter 1466. No way. Everyone shook their heads. To be able to persist until this point, everyone had to be impressed. However, what Ling Han had to contend against was heaven and earth. There was a limit to one's strength, but there was no limit to the power of heaven and earth. How could he possibly contend against this? No one felt that Ling Han wasn't talented enough, but there was no helping it. In front of heaven and earth, even saints had to lower their heads. Otherwise, saints should be able to resist aging, sickness, and death, and transcend beyond heaven and earth. However, not only did saints have a limited lifespan, but they also had to experience the immortals' tribulation. If they couldn't overcome it, their life force would be severed. This was enough to prove that if heaven and earth wanted to kill, no one could escape. Who asked Ling Han to be so lucky? He actually advanced 2 minor levels in a single breath, and when the 2 heavenly tribulations arrived, he could only die with regret. Who would have thought that a great opportunity would become a great calamity? Some people were gloating. They themselves couldn't ascend to the ranks of the strongest king tiers, yet they couldn't wait for all those stronger than them to die so that they could stand out. That's not right. This brat isn't such a short-lived brat. The large black dog stopped biting and stood on his hind legs with his paws clasped behind his back. It was as if he was deep in thought, exuding an unfathomable aura. However, a pair of iron underwear completely destroyed this solemnity. The large black dog immediately revealed his true colors. He shook his head and said, "Forget it, whether this brat lives or dies is none of Grandpa Dog's business." Ling Han's condition became worse and worse, and the heavenly tribulation became more and more vicious. Even with the protection of the indestructible heaven scroll, the speed at which he recovered from his injuries couldn't keep up with the extent of his injuries. There was practically not a single intact bone in his body. However, he was still fighting, exuding an unswerving determination. Even at the last moment, even if he was at the end of his rope, he wouldn't give up. The divine demon sword had long since been summoned, and it radiated with a celestial light in the heavenly tribulation. Although it was still a level 11 god tool, it exuded a palpitating pressure, possessing a sliver of the might of a celestial tool. Under the 2 heavenly tribulations, the divine demon sword also received a qualitative improvement. Ling Han continuously consumed indestructible true fluid to speed up the recovery of his body. However, the effects of using indestructible true fluid continuously decreased. Very soon, he had used up all 10 drops of indestructible true fluid. However, the heavenly tribulation was still raging. Clang lightning hacked down. Ling Han lost an arm. Divine blood sprayed out, but it was full of vitality. It nourished this region, making the plants here immediately increase by more than 10 zhang. Clang another streak of lightning hacked down. Ling Han lost a leg, and then a large region in the distance was turned into a fairyland. Countless divine medicines grew frantically, and there was no lack of 9th level or even 10th level medicines. Clang, this was a fatal attack. It struck Ling Han's neck and almost sliced his body in half. Even so, blood still fell like rain from the wound, filling the entire sunken abyss valley with vitality. The barren land had transformed into a lush green land. Clang, heaven and earth were merciless, and it delivered the final blow. Ling Han's entire body was shaken into dust. This time, it was not that Ling Han took the initiative to disintegrate his fleshly body. He simply could not take it anymore. Finished, the genius of a generation was finished just like that. He was a king tier that could contend with Gu Daoyi. Good. Nie Tiancheng and Shan Jingyi chuckled coldly. They had been tricked by Ling Han. Although they had fought their way back, they had also fallen to the bottom of the valley because of the hanging dog incident. In the end, they had not obtained any benefits. Now that Ling Han had died, they were naturally elated. It was as if they had eaten honey. Once a person died, the heavenly tribulation would naturally stop. However, just as the lightning clouds showed signs of dissipating, they suddenly condensed again. What's going on? Everyone was confused. Could it be that they were going to whip his corpse? However, there was not even a speck of dust left of Ling Han, so how were they going to whip him? Boom! A streak of flames surged in the sky, and then transformed into raging flames that filled the sky. A figure rapidly materialized and then stepped out. Ling Han. Holy shit! When they saw this scene, everyone's eyes widened, and they were so shocked that their scalps went numb. This person had clearly died, and not even his ashes remained. In fact, even the heavenly tribulation had begun to dissipate. How had he come back to life? Ling Han slowly walked forward, and the boundless flames were absorbed into his body, pushing his energy to the pinnacle. Indestructible heaven scroll, rising from the ashes. His expression was solemn. This was his most powerful trump card. If he still could not survive the heavenly tribulation with this, what would he do? Quang. The heavenly tribulation continued to crash down, each one more powerful than the last. It continued to wreak havoc in a frenzy, and it had already been close to 2 days. Suddenly, after a bolt of lightning struck down, there were no more. Instead, the dark clouds dispersed, and the sun could once again be seen. This astonishing tribulation had finally passed. Ling Han's body was riddled with wounds, and he sat heavily on the ground. Even with his iron will, he felt as if his body was about to collapse. Everyone looked at him with admiration, and there was even fear in their eyes. It was as if he were not a human, but rather a monster. He had died and come back to life. Who had seen him before? Ling Han frowned slightly. He had exposed his most powerful trump card in front of everyone this time, so he would not be able to use it as a surprise attack in the future. Thankfully, he still had a trump card, and that was the Black Tower, which was even more indestructible than the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. Additionally, the secret of the 9 Heavens Flame had not been exposed either. This was also a powerful trump card that was not inferior to the Black Tower. Gu Daoyi, come and fight. Ling Han stood up and called out loudly. The battle between Gu Daoyi and Empress Luan Xing had already reached its climax, and Gu Daoyi had the advantage. Though Empress Luan Xing was also astonishingly powerful, she was ultimately no match for Gu Daoyi's divine fetus. If it were not for the fact that she still had a brick in her hand, she might have already been defeated. How could Ling Han possibly watch helplessly as his wife was beaten? Gu Daoyi stopped. He was extremely wary of Ling Han. If he was attacked from both sides by Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing, even he would feel a headache. You want to fight me? He asked menacingly. Though we are husband and wife, I will not bully you. Let's fight one-on-one. Ling Han stretched out a hand. Though he was bathed in blood, his aura instantly exploded to the limit. A mere Gu Daoyi still wanted to express his disdain, but Ling Han had already shot out a punch, causing him to suddenly stop and retreat 1,000 meters. Again? Gu Daoyi's mouth twisted in anger. It had been like this before. He wanted to taunt, but was attacked repeatedly by Ling Han, causing him to not even be able to finish his words. Damn it! Gu Daoyi could not be bothered to speak anymore. He wanted to kill Ling Han. Mystical power of 10 lives. He used mystical power after mystical power, and finally blasted out a powerful move. He used 10 lives at the same time, and joined forces to attack Ling Han. This time, he was in his complete state, and he also had a saint tool in hand, so his strength was boundlessly strong. Ling Han smiled calmly. This time, there was no need to hide his strength. He directly channeled Heaven's might, and weakened Gu Daoyi's power by 1 or 2 stars. The divine demon sword slashed out, and celestial light illuminated the world. He raised his hand, and endless divine light was dazzling, blinding one's eyes. Others had formed the sun physique with just a tiny bit of benefit, but Ling Han had cultivated inside the sun stone, and the benefits that everyone else had obtained combined were not even equal to a single thought of his. Thus, he could directly advance from the early stage of the high extreme to the peak stage of the pinnacle level. If it was not for the fact that the threshold of the eternal river tier was really too difficult to cross, he could even advance further. However, if he really took this step, then that Ling Han should not be able to survive 3 heavenly tribulations. He would really be done for. Gu Daoyi couldn't help but feel gloomy. Chapter 1468. The first person to be called out must be the most valued genius of the Martial Institute. Gu Daoyi, the greatest prodigy of all time. Everyone looked enviously at Gu Daoyi. This was the publicly acknowledged strongest prodigy. His physique was extraordinary, and he could suppress all others. Unfortunately, he hadn't been able to gain an overwhelming advantage in his 2 battles against Ling Han and Empress Luanxing. This caused his reputation to be tarnished. But no matter what, the 9 great sages still favored him and listed him first. To be favored by a saint is a great honor. Instantly, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people's eyes reddened. At first, Gu Daoyi had not needed to take saints seriously. He had once been an ancestor of the severing mundane tier, but he had lived his 10th life. His mentality had become younger, and this was especially so after he had failed to defeat Ling Han or Empress Luanxing several times. This made him feel sullen. Now that he was the first to be listed, it was as if he was riding the chaos and writing his name, which made him feel a little proud. He walked out proudly, and there was a huge empty space in front of him. The 9 saints were each sitting cross-legged on a stone lotus platform. It was only 3 feet tall, but wherever the saints were, it was a holy land. Divine light shone, and a strange fragrance assailed the nostrils. Fresh flowers fell from the sky, as if they were celebrating. "I wish to take it," a saint said. "I wish to take him," another saint spoke up. "I wish to take it. I wish to take it." The 9 saints spoke one after another, all expressing their desire to take Gu Daoyi as their disciple. This caused the 3,000 or so cultivators to feel incredibly jealous. Those were 9 saints, and all of them had actually said that they wanted to take Gu Daoyi as their disciple. This kind of honor was really too great. Gu Daoyi's heart was filled with pride. In his opinion, even a saint would not be qualified to take him as a disciple, but who asked him to be only in the heavenly body tier at present? The accumulation he had accumulated in the Medicine King's cave was already more or less used up. If he wanted to return to the level of a saint in the shortest time possible, he would have to rely on external power. The Star Sand Martial Arts Academy was the best choice. His goal was to obtain the Star Sand Saint's favor and take him as his 10th disciple. If he were to use all of his resources to nurture him, he would be confident that he would be able to return to the Saint King tier within 1,000 years. At that time, he would be able to tear open the passageway to the immortal domain, return to his homeland, and stir up a storm again. He, Gu Daoyi, was going to become a king tier of the celestial realm in this life, and compete for luck with the true sons and true daughters of the great sections. "Gu Daoyi, which academy do you wish to join?" the 6th saint, Saint Ming, asked. Gu Daoyi pondered for a moment. At present, he still did not have the right to request to directly become a disciple of the Star Sand Saint. Clearly, the Star Sand Saint still had to observe him, and choose the one he liked the most out of the 900 disciples. Only then would he take him as his final personal disciple, and nurture him with great care. Unfortunately, he couldn't say that he had been a severing mundane ancestor in the past, and advancing to the saint tier was no small matter. If he really said that, wouldn't he be afraid that someone would snatch his fruit of Tao? Now, he regretted not killing Ling Han at that time and leaving behind trouble in the future. He could only blame himself for being hot-headed at that time and actually being persuaded by Ling Han. Actually, it was impossible for him to kill Ling Han at that time, because the Black Tower was there. He thought for a moment before saying, "I wish to become a disciple of the Black River Sage." The Star River Saint was the first disciple of the Star Sand Saint, and his strength was unfathomable. It was rumored that it was extremely likely that he would become a medium saint. However, Gu Daoyi had clearly not made this choice because he wanted to become a medium saint. Rather, he felt that only the first disciple was barely worthy of his status. All right. The Black River Saint nodded, and with a wave of his hand, Gu Daoyi flew to the lotus platform that he was on. There were 900 spots, and there was already one less. Linghan, the Eternal River Tier elite from before, called out again. Only the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy could use an Eternal River Tier as an announcer. Linghan was second. Many people wore strange expressions. This was a battle for the title of the strongest king tier, and only one person could ascend to the top. Previously, Linghan had won once, and in the Sunken Abyss Valley, he had relied on Empress Luanxing to restrict Gu Daoyi. However, this time, Gu Daoyi had won. In the eyes of the saints, it was clear that Gu Daoyi's physique was better. I wish to accept. I wish to accept. I wish to accept. The 9 saints spoke almost at the same time. Although Linghan was slightly inferior to them, this was mainly in terms of his innate physique. However, he was still a rare gem that was worth sculpting. This was also why Linghan was ranked second. Of course, he couldn't compare to Gu Daoyi. He was a divine fetus, and his future was limitless. In fact, their master had even wanted to directly accept Gu Daoyi as a disciple. However, after thinking about it, he still had to give others a chance and some encouragement, so he gave up on this idea. Now that Gu Daoyi had appeared in this generation, no matter how freakishly talented one was, they would pale in comparison. The difference was too great, and they had no right to compete. Linghan, what's your choice? The Black River Saint asked. Linghan's expression was calm, but he was actually very displeased. Why was he inferior to Gu Daoyi? He hadn't been at a disadvantage in either of their 2 clashes, and he still had some ultimate moves that he hadn't used. If he fought to the death, he would have risen from the ashes, which was equivalent to having 2 lives. How could he not kill Gu Daoyi? Why did they rank him behind Gu Daoyi? He had lost. In the eyes of these saints, physique was still more important. Gu Daoyi was a divine fetus. Fine, when he stepped on Gu Daoyi's face in the future, he would see what expression these saints would have. Linghan pondered. In reality, it didn't matter which campus he entered. He had just obtained a large pile of secret techniques. Although they couldn't be considered supreme treasures in the celestial realm, in the immortal realm, any one of them could move a saint. He swept his gaze around and said, I'm willing to become a disciple of the Tranquil Heart Saint. Huh. The 9 saints were slightly surprised. Although they were all saints, there was still a difference in strength among them. Among the 9 saints, the Black River Saint was naturally the strongest. Moreover, the Black River Saint was also skilled in using the sword. No matter what, Linghan should choose to become a disciple of the Black River Saint. Could it be because of Gu Daoyi? But why did he choose the Tranquil Heart Saint? Among the 9 saints, the 4 saints Bitter Medicine and the 8 saints Tranquil Heart were slightly more special. They weren't pure cultivators, but rather had become saints through alchemical pills and formations respectively. Could it be that Linghan wanted to neglect his proper duties and learn formations from the Tranquil Heart Saint? However, it was really too difficult to become a saint through formations. In the last several 100 million years, only the Tranquil Heart Saint had succeeded, which showed how difficult this path was. All right, the Tranquil Heart Saint said. Although he had become a saint through formations, how high and mighty were saints? How could it be that he couldn't guide a heavenly body tier? He stretched out a hand, and Linghan flew under his lotus throne. The great elite of the Eternal River Tier, Empress Luanxing, looked at the name list and was slightly hesitant. This person actually used a title as her name, and she was an empress at that. He couldn't help but feel displeased. But this woman could be ranked 3rd, which was enough to prove how high her talent was and how much she was valued. Even if his cultivation level was higher now, being able to stand out among prodigies that were as common as clouds and rank among the best, this woman's future would definitely be limitless. Although there could only be one more saint, perhaps she could advance into the pinnacle level of the Eternal River Tier and become a saint in another way? Thus, he suppressed his displeasure and didn't show it on his face. Empress Luanxing walked out with graceful steps. Even though she was extremely charming and could charm millions, there was an incredible pride in her bones. In her eyes, everyone was a smelly bug, and only one person was worthy of her care. All of a sudden, the whole place fell silent. Everyone was intoxicated by the Empress' charm. Chapter 1469. The Empress was domineering, and her charm was boundless. To say nothing of the young king tiers losing their voices and collapsing from intoxication, even the 9 saints were slightly infatuated. The Empress's charm was evident. I want. The 9 saints all spoke up, but before they could finish, they saw that Empress Luanxing had already walked to the lotus seat of the Tranquil Heart Saint, standing beside Ling Han. As the saying went, when the husband sings, the wife follows. Would she have made any other choice? At this moment, the 9 saints' expressions darkened. What's wrong with you? We haven't even finished expressing our opinions, yet you've already chosen yourself. Do you still have any respect for the other saints? If it had been anyone else, even Gu Daoyi, they would have inevitably reprimanded him. However, in the face of Empress Luanxing's supreme charm, no one could harden their hearts. They felt that it was acceptable no matter how arrogant this empress was. Who asked her to be so beautiful? Forget it, she's a top-notch prodigy, after all. It'll be fine as long as it doesn't happen again. Long Xiangyu. The 4th person was Long Xiangyu. This woman was valiant and heroic, like a human-shaped true dragon. Just by standing there, she exuded an oppressive and domineering aura. Although being the 4th person was already an outstanding result, there wasn't much of a smile on her face. For others, 4th place was already an extremely high ranking, but for her, it was a humiliation. Her goal was 1st place. However, a temporary loss didn't mean a permanent loss. She would definitely defeat the first 3 people and become the only king tier of the younger generation. Because she was the descendant of the true dragon, her bloodline was incredibly pure, and she was destined to stand high above all others. She chose the 2nd saint, the Rosy Cloud Saint. She was the only female among the 9 saints, and she was also half-human. She possessed the bloodline of the ancient divine beast, the Stone Origin Tortoise. To her, this was the best choice. They both possessed the bloodline of a divine beast, and they were all female. 2nd in the world. Zi Chenfeng. One after another, the top-notch king tiers were called out. Then, they chose which branch to join, and which saint to become a disciple of. However, only rank 3 king tiers were qualified to have all 9 saints ask for their subordinates at the same time. When it came to rank 2 king tiers, aside from the Rain Emperor and Notionless Saint, only a few saints had asked for their subordinates. The further they went, the fewer people would fight over people. After rank 2 king tiers, rank 1 king tiers would find it even harder to attract the interest of the sages. If all 9 sages shook their heads at the same time, they would be mercilessly eliminated. However, there were also a few rank 1 kings that attracted the interest of the sages. Although it was not to the point where 9 sages were competing against each other, it was still not easy to make 3 or 4 sages nod in unison. One of them was called Wu Zhengfu, and there was a clear moon shining behind him. However, this was not the moon of the sun-moon tier, but rather his extremely rare, bright moon physique. Under the illumination of the moon, one's power would soar greatly. This was an extremely powerful support ability, and it could have an astonishing effect in a group battle. Thus, it was fought over by several saints, and in the end, Wu Zhengfu chose to join the 3rd saint, the Torrential Rain Saint. One of them was called Lu Kanzi, and his left arm was actually a spear. As his cultivation level increased, the strength of this arm would also continuously increase, and it was comparable to godly metal of the same level. This was also an extremely rare physique. It was called the weapon physique, and a part of the body was born as a weapon. He became the disciple of the 5th saint, the Iron Saber Saint, because the Iron Saber Saint also had a weapon physique and could guide him the best. The Notionless Saint, Ding Ping, Zhu Yao, and the Rain Emperor all received the favor of several saints, But only the Tranquil Heart Saint had chosen Jiuyao. Thus, only Jiuyao had joined the 8th Astral 8. The others, like the Rain Emperor and the Notionless Saint, had all joined other branches. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was still very lucky. Although her talent was not outstanding, perhaps because there were relatively few female king tiers, she was accepted by the Rosy Clouds Saint as a disciple. Half a day later, all 900 disciples had been chosen, and those who were not chosen could only leave. The next time the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy opened again would be a matter of 1 million years later. Aside from the disciples of the 9th Astral 8, the others were all taken away by their corresponding saints. The 9 Astral 8 were spread across every corner of Woodfigure Planet, and the distance between them was actually quite large. Even Heavenly Body Tier elites would need to travel for over 10 days to reach the nearest branch. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was reluctant to part with Ling Han. She wanted nothing more than to stick with Ling Han all day long. However, she could only leave with the others now, and when everything settled down, she would come back to find Ling Han for a rendezvous. Lu Juntian also appeared, and his gaze toward Ling Han was slightly complicated. However, it was still filled with killing intent. Ling Han's talent was ranked second among all the king tiers, and this caused him to waver slightly. Should he move forward and stop seeking revenge against Ling Han? However, the hatred for his younger brother's death was boiling in his heart, and he still couldn't let it go. Thus, he would wait until he was confident enough to kill Ling Han. Killing intent involuntarily welled up in Ling Han's eyes. If there was a chance, he would also kill Lu Juntian to avoid any more trouble. Lu Juntian wasn't the only one who had enmity with Ling Han. There were also Nie Tiancheng, Shan Jingyi, and some others who hated Ling Han because of his relationship with Empress Luanxing. Among the people that Ling Han knew, Faceless had passed and become the disciple of the 3rd saint. Yang Lin had passed and become the disciple of the 7th saint. However, the Cloud Maiden and Yu Ying had both been eliminated and could only return dejectedly. The Stone Emperor and North Emperor had naturally passed. Sure enough, the two of them were in the same boat, and they had both become the disciples of the 9 Azure Saint. There wasn't much time to bid farewell, and everyone continued on their way. In any case, they would have plenty of time to spend together in the future. The Tranquil Heart Saint waved his hand, and 100 disciples were swept up. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the 8th campus. This campus was built on a green mountain, and it was unknown how tall it was. When they raised their heads, they could only see swirling clouds. There was naturally no need to trouble a saint with trivial matters like daily living. An Eternal River Tier elite naturally appeared, and he led them to a courtyard. He then tossed them a pile of plaques and said, "Take one each. You can open the courtyard with the corresponding number. This will be your residence in the future. There is a jade scroll in your residence. As long as you read through the information in it, you will naturally learn the various rules of the academy." After saying this, he floated away. Eternal River Tier elites were naturally very busy. Ling Han and the others were just about to enter the gate of the courtyard when they saw the gate open on its own. A dozen or so people walked out, blocking the gate. The person in the lead swept his gaze over them and said with a scoff, "Why are all the people we recruited this time trash? Trash doesn't have the right to enter through the gate. Crawl through this dog hole." He pointed at the side of the gate, and sure enough, there was a dog hole there. How could the new disciples not know that this was a show of strength by the older disciples? The man blocking the way was shockingly an Eternal River Tier elite. Chapter 1470. In the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, there was a tradition, and that was that the senior brothers and sisters had to show their might to the junior brothers and sisters who had just entered the academy. This was because those who could enter this place were all geniuses of their generation, and they were at least at the king level. Which king is not arrogant? Therefore, it was necessary to suppress them and let them know that there was always someone better. Cultivating for an extra 1 million years in the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. What kind of concept was that? Furthermore, some senior brothers and sisters had not only cultivated for an extra 1 million years. It was possible that they had cultivated for 2 million years, 5 million years, or even 10 million years. This leader was called Gowning, and he was a disciple who had entered the Star San Martial Arts Academy 3 million years ago. At the time, he had also been a king tier. However, he had lacked countless years of cultivation, so he had naturally been taught a harsh lesson when he had first entered the academy. 700,000 years ago, he had broken through to the Eternal River tier, so he was naturally filled with confidence and arrogance. Some of the senior brothers and sisters who had bullied him in the past had already left the Star San Martial Arts Academy, and those who hadn't left were more powerful than him. He couldn't afford to provoke them. Thus, he set his sights on the new juniors. It was a tradition to show off their strength to the newcomers. Gowning pointed at the dog hole. This wasn't a newly dug dog hole. Rather, it had existed for hundreds of millions of years. Every new student had to crawl through this dog hole. So what if you were a king tier? You wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from an Eternal River tier elite. The dog hole wasn't the only way to show off their power. There was more to come. What awaited these new students was an incomparably long day. The aura of the Eternal River tier rippled, vast and awe-inspiring. So what if they were king tiers? Their hearts were all trembling. However, there were two exceptions, Ling Han and Empress Luanxing. They were all at the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. Their power had broken through to the Eternal River tier, and their battle prowess could even rival the late stage or peak stage of the low extreme. If they wanted to suppress them with their aura, they should ask the saints to do it. Gowning glared at him, and his aura instantly increased 100-fold. What are you all standing around for? Hurry up and crawl over. A senior brother shouted as he jumped out and pointed at the others. His abilities were slightly weaker, and he was only at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Most likely, he could not have cultivated to the pinnacle level. Otherwise, he would basically be a rank 3 king tier. However, before this, even the Star San Martial Arts Academy had not been able to recruit a rank 3 king tier. To say nothing of rank 3 king tiers, even rank 2 king tiers were pitifully rare. Thus, this person was most likely a rank 1 king tier. Moreover, he had cultivated to the Mountain River tier. Hurry up. Don't tell me you want senior brother E to take action? Someone urged. These people had all crawled through the dog hole and suffered torture, so they naturally had a strong desire for revenge. They were waiting for the day to come when they could return everything to the next generation of junior brothers and sisters. Why? A junior brother resisted. This is the Star San Martial Arts Academy. How dare you all act recklessly? What a joke. Since you know this is a martial courtyard, you should understand that martial arts are respected here. A senior brother sneered. If you don't want to be beaten every day, then obediently crawl through the dog hole. Otherwise, what awaits you will be much crueler than this. Forget it, let me tell you a story. He began to speak. Of course, it was impossible for all of the previous freshmen to choose to submit. Some resisted, but were suppressed and had no choice but to submit. There were also some who chose to escape, seeking help from the academy's teachers. But this was useless. There was no lack of Eternal River tier elites among the students, and there were even those in the high extreme and consummate level. So what if they were teachers? They could choose to resist. The person who sought help was very miserable. The moment he stepped out, he was stripped naked. In the end, he had to crawl through the dog hole in humiliation and follow the rules. Only then did the matter end. This was tradition, and no one could be an exception. Even the few lofty figures in the academy had experienced this in the past. After hearing this, the young king tiers were shaken. They had heard a few names, and they were all famous. It was rumored that they were at least in the high extreme of the Eternal River tier, but they had also been forced to crawl through the dog hole like they had. But now, they were high and lofty, the overlords of the students. Even the teachers didn't dare to provoke them. Crawl, this was tradition. The king tiers all lowered their noble heads, and crawled through the dog hole one after another. But this wasn't the end. The show had only just begun. But since they had already lowered their heads and let go of their pride, their will to resist would become weaker and weaker. The older students watched with smiles on their faces. They giggled and pointed, and some looked rueful. They could see themselves in the past from these new students. However, they had finally grown from wives to wives, and it was their turn to bully the new students. There were only 100 people, so no matter how slow they were, how long would it take for all of them to crawl through the dog hole? And what are you three still standing there for? A senior brother glared at Ling Han and the others. The others were all lining up in front of the dog hole, and there were still 7 or 8 who hadn't crawled through, but these 3 were leisurely, as if this matter had nothing to do with them, and they were just acting. What are you not standing there for? Ling Han asked with a smile. Come and line up, crawl through the dog hole. That senior brother called out loudly. You don't even know how to crawl through the dog hole? The other senior brothers giggled. Seeing the king tiers being humiliated, there was an indescribable pleasure in their hearts. This should also be one of the reasons why this tradition had been passed down from generation to generation and hadn't been abandoned. I really don't know. Senior brothers, why don't you demonstrate the standard movements? In any case, you all have experience. Ling Han was all smiles and there wasn't any anger on his face. Gasp! When these words left his mouth, all the senior brothers were angered. How dare you touch a sore spot? In the past, they had been humiliated, and this was a shadow in their hearts. Only by becoming a punisher could they wash away this humiliation. But no matter what, this was still an unhappy history. You dared to mention it in front of them? Asking to be taught a lesson. A senior brother walked out and said, there's no lack of troublemakers every time. Come, the new students of this batch will be the 3 of you. His eyes swept over and suddenly stopped on Empress Luanxing. His mouth involuntarily gaped, and there was an intense look of amazement in his eyes. This style was too intoxicating. Even if he hadn't seen her face, his heart still couldn't help but beat wildly. Ping, ping, ping. It was so fast that it was as if his heart was about to jump out of his throat. Master, let me. Juyao took a step forward. Previously, in the sunken abyss valley, he hadn't even had the chance to spar with an elite, and his hands were itching. Ling Han thought for a moment, nodded, and said, all right. Juyao had obtained the benefits of the Sun Stone, and his cultivation level had advanced to the middle stage of the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Meanwhile, his opponent was only in the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Even if he was at the peak stage, Ling Han believed that with Jioyao's strength, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Come! Blazing fighting spirit burned in Jiuyao. He wanted to see just how powerful the disciples of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy were. Little junior brother, today, I'll give you some pointers. Even if we're both king tiers, how far can the gap between us reach? That senior brother's whole body trembled, and a black fog actually flowed out from under his feet, enveloping both him and Jiuyao. This was one of his ultimate techniques. When enveloped by the black fog, it could obscure one's vision and senses. In this way, his opponent's full battle prowess would be reduced by at least 50 to 60%. Wang, a brilliant light suddenly erupted from within the black fog. It was as if a sun had appeared, instantly dispersing the black fog. Chapter 1472. Spar. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle. He shook his head and said, I welcome a true spar at any time. Unfortunately, this isn't a spar. You're clearly trying to intimidate us. Let's fight. Enough nonsense. If you lose to me, I'll have to trouble you to crawl into the dog hole. Yi Gaoning's expression darkened. Crawl into the dog hole? He was an Eternal River tier elite. Even on Wood Figure Planet, where there were 10 saints, Eternal River tier elites could still be called elites. Everyone had to respect them. Yet, he actually wanted an Eternal River tier elite to crawl into the dog hole? I've seen many audacious people, but you. Yi Gaoning shook his head and said, Junior Brother Ling, you're indeed extraordinarily talented. However, you should know that this is the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. There's no lack of prodigies here. Ling Han laughed loudly, appearing incredibly arrogant. That's because you haven't encountered me. He said this in an extremely heroic manner. His entire body was radiating with an astonishing aura, and it was enough to make one's heart tremble. Yi Gaoning was also moved by his aura. He faltered for a moment before saying with a troubled expression, "Then let's fight." He was filled with regret. Why had he accepted this task? If he had known that there would be such a troublesome newcomer, he wouldn't have fought so hard. Now, not only had he encountered a troublemaker, but this troublemaker was also freakishly powerful. Thousand Execution Dao. He patted his body. It could be felt that there was actually a dazzling spot of light flickering in his body. This was a formation eye. The Tranquil Heart Saint had comprehended Dao through formations, and his body was a formation. Every single bone in his body was a formation eye, and he himself was a great killing formation. Multiple golden sabers appeared around Yi Gaoning, their murderous aura soaring into the sky. A guess involuntarily formed in Ling Han's mind as he watched. In the lower realm, Ma Duo Bao was a natural killing formation, and his body was engraved with the number 1 killing formation in the world. Apart from that, there was also the 3rd killing formation, which was also a person. Could it be that this wasn't the work of the heavens? Rather, it was also a bloodline inheritance? In the case of Yi Gaoning and the others, as long as they were powerful enough, they would be able to pass down the formation patterns engraved on their bones to their descendants. Of course, they wouldn't be able to leave the formation patterns intact. However, as long as even a tiny bit of the formation patterns remained, they would be able to be referred to as the number 1 killing formation or the number 1 killing formation in a small world. Previously, he already knew that all bloodlines were actually formed by an ancestor condensing a powerful technique into the body. That was how they could be passed down from generation to generation. Then, why couldn't a raise work? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, Yi Gaoning had already made his move. Several hundred golden sabers shot toward him. Ling Han advanced forcefully, completely unreasonable. "Do you want to die?" Yi Gaoning couldn't help but chuckle coldly. He had to admit that Ling Han's technique was extremely astonishing. Ling Han had nullified his attack in a way that he couldn't understand. But just now, he had only done it casually. Now he was going all out. Yet you actually bumped into him head-on. Aren't you courting death? As you wish. Yi Gaoning activated the spell formation and fused his own battle prowess into it. He pushed it to its limits and blasted it toward Ling Han. He naturally wouldn't kill Ling Han. Taking him down a notch was just taking him down a notch. If he killed Ling Han, then he would definitely have to pay with his life. No one could be an exception. However, Ling Han's bones would definitely be broken, and he would be riddled with wounds. Ding 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 ding. The golden sabers shot toward Ling Han. It was as if they weren't condensed from origin power or spiritual chi, but rather true god tools. However, so what? The golden sabers were all deflected when they struck Ling Han's body. It was as if they weren't an attack from an Eternal River tier elite, but rather a random god tool. How was this possible? Yi Gaoning couldn't accept this. What kind of fucking defensive treasured robe was Ling Han wearing? How could he be so freakishly strong? He could even withstand his full power attack so easily. However, he could clearly see that there weren't any divine patterns glowing on Ling Han's body. If he were a treasured tool, there was no way that his body would be so calm. Could it be his physique? Indeed, Ling Han's physique had already surpassed level 13 godly metal. However, just this alone wasn't enough to completely resist a king tier at the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. More importantly, he had actively channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, causing his defenses to reach an astonishing level for a short period of time. He could even withstand the attack of a saint. Since that was the case, what did Yi Gaoning count for? After unleashing his most powerful attack, his defenses would definitely be at their weakest. Ling Han's fist shot out, smashing into Yi Gaoning's face. Yi Gaoning was instantly sent flying, and he crashed heavily into the door. Then he bounced back, his limbs splayed out as he lay sprawled on the ground. Everyone grimaced in shock upon seeing this. Were the new students of this batch going to defy the heavens? Yi Gaoning was undoubtedly powerful, yet he had been defeated by a single strike from Ling Han. In fact, if Yi Gaoning had been prepared, he would have engaged in a prolonged battle with Ling Han. Even if Ling Han could win, it would have taken him hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of strikes. However, he didn't know that Ling Han's physique was freakishly strong. Thus, he was instantly at a huge disadvantage in a head-on clash. Great! The 7 new students couldn't help but shout. They naturally didn't want to crawl through the dog hole. They were mighty king tiers, so how could they be willing to suffer such humiliation? Thus, they couldn't help but feel excited when they saw that Ling Han had launched a counterattack. Moreover, he had even gained the upper hand. Even if an even stronger senior student appeared in the end and forced them to crawl through the dog hole, they wouldn't care. They had resisted, and they had even slapped the senior student in the face. Yi Gaoning slowly crawled to his feet. In the instant that he had been struck by Ling Han, he had still used his origin power to protect his face. Thus, although he had been sent flying, his injuries weren't very severe. After all, his cultivation level was at the late stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. Moreover, he was a king tier. His face was flushed red. He had actually lost to a new student. His eyes were burning with rage and darkness. He had been slapped in the face in public. This was a great humiliation. If he didn't take revenge for this, how would he be able to face others in the future? Just you wait. However, Yi Gaoning didn't choose to fight to the death with Ling Han. He was afraid that he would seek further humiliation. He was going to ask an even stronger senior student to come forward and suppress Ling Han. Rules were rules. To say nothing of Ling Han, hadn't the present few saints also climbed through the dog hole in the past? Ling Han could forget about setting a precedent. This would be making an enemy out of the whole Star San Martial Arts Academy, and he was destined to lose. You want to leave just like that? Ling Han sneered. What a joke. I didn't provoke anyone, but you want me to crawl through the dog hole. You want to leave just because you can't beat me? Is there such a good thing in the world? Could it be that you want to keep me here? Yi Gaoning couldn't help but laugh. I don't want to, but I will. Ling Han's murderous aura surged. I've said it before, if you can't beat me, you'll have to crawl into the dog hole. Dream on. Yi Gaoning sneered. There had been no lack of troublemakers throughout history, and there had also been some supremely talented individuals. However, in the end, hadn't they all been suppressed by the seniors? There was nothing they could do about it. Yi Gaoning's cultivation was so much weaker than his, so how could he possibly be a match for them? If the low extreme of the Eternal River tier couldn't suppress you, then what about the medium extreme or the consummate level of the high extreme? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.